Compaq gives birth to the PC clone. Commodore and TI declare war on Sinclair. And a day of reckoning awaits the software business. These stories and many, many more on this episode of the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine.
I've been waiting a long time for a chance to say this. Stop the presses.
Requiescat in pace.
Makes him crazy, man. What is a man?
It's me, Mario.
What a mess.
Get over here!
Please, save me.
Compaq gives birth to the PC clone. Commodore and TI declare war on Sinclair. And a day of reckoning awaits the software business. These stories and many, many more on this episode of the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine. Welcome back to the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine, the show where we travel back in time to find out what was making headlines in the home computer and video game industries of yesteryear. Today we're turning back the clock 40 years to January of 1983. I'm your host, Carl, and I'm joined again by everybody's favorite co-host, John. Welcome back to the show, John.
It's good to be back. I appreciate the invite.
Oh, please, you are always welcome here. So, everybody, we've got another massive episode because, as listeners know, we're sort of in the crash. The crash officially happened in December, but there's so much going on. But we do need to have our obligatory banter, so what have you been up to since we last saw you here on the Time Machine?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a loaded question in addition to this loaded episode. Oh, man. Surviving the holidays. I think we've recorded and released the holiday episode in between now, and we've done for the Retro Game Squad podcast.
And Jeff has been here in the meantime, so
That's true. I'm very glad I finally got you guys linked up, because he's been asking about it, you've been asking about it. I was like, well, we ask each other about it. So, awesome.
That was fun. Thank you again. We had a good time.
All he could tell me was good things, as I expected, but it's nice to hear it from the horse's mouth, of course. But, that I'm glad you guys enjoyed that. I've been talking to Guido too, because you've had him on a couple episodes as well, right?
Oh yeah, Wouter has been here quite a few times at this point. Yeah,
excellent.
Yeah, no, he's good people. Love him, especially since he can also record during my daytime. So that's always nice.
Yeah, fair warning. Yeah, we're quite a bit distanced with our time zones. So
yeah. And we were supposed to start over an hour ago, but somehow we got lost on trying to figure out what the CPUs were on old Tiger handheld electronics. That's the level of geekdom our listeners have come to expect.
Absolutely. So we're putting out an SOS. What CPU is in the Tiger electronic handhelds? And, plot twist, the re-releases. What CPUs did they use? Yes, they reprinted them.
But did they use the same paper behind the LCD screen? That's really the question.
Yes. What paper stock?
Yeah. Okay, so we have that. You've been up to a lot. Everybody, if you're not already a listener to the Retro Game Squad, what's wrong with you? Go and listen. It's a good show. Now... And
we
also,
okay.
let's face it, you guys dwarf any listenership here, so it doesn't really matter. But, okay, we've got that out of the way. We have a ton of stuff to do. Remember, everybody, all the links to the socials, Twitter, Mastodon, Instagram, Pinterest, blah, 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 blah. It's all down in the show notes, as well as a link to the YouTube versions of all of this. And... of course, that's the nice little segue. You can also watch the video versions of our next segment. If you are a member of our Patreon, just $1 a month will get you in, and we also have early access there to our interview episodes, so go check it out. And that first segment that we were talking about is, of course, the 7 Minutes in Heaven, where our intrepid co-host must play a game that was reviewed in a publication dated January 1983 that they have never played before for 7 minutes. And we had a plethora of titles, arcade classics like Pango and Moon Patrol, the Vectrex, Star Trek, and Cosmic Chasm games. We had, Popeye in the arcade as well. We had interesting VIC-20 titles like Omega Race and Radar Rat Race. We had the absolutely groundbreaking Apple II title, Miner 2049er. But, and let's not forget The Hobbit on the Spectrum. Hey, and the Specky is suddenly now a contender. This is the first game from the Spectrum that was worthy of a 7 Minutes in Heaven nomination. But you decided on a game that was part of a lot of VCS games that you just purchased recently that you hadn't played yet. The Activision classic River Raid. Are you ready to raid some rivers?
Rivers will be raided.
Excellent. Then let's get going. So, welcome back, John, from your 7 Minutes in Heaven. Based on your time with River Raid, how would you describe the game to the uninitiated?
First I would say addicting. It's probably and we had a little bit of banter about it already, it's one of the most advanced 2600 games I've seen so far. You take on the role of a fighter plane who is in fact raiding a river. It's a vertical scrolling river, and you're shooting fuel, apparently, which is also your lifeline because you've got a constantly depleting fuel gauge, but you get points for shooting them, so it's definitely worth doing as long as you can manage your fuel correctly. And you are flying along this river trying to stay alive, don't hit the walls, don't hit the ships, and go for the highest score. 3 tries and you're out.
That sounds like a very straightforward description. And, of course, it sounds probably like a very simplistic game if you're just listening to it like that. But, obviously, we're dealing with a 2600, and at the time, there had been nothing even remotely like this on the system.
Oh, man. I could totally see little Johnny ripping his River Raid out of the box for the first time, popping it in, and just being transported to this just sprawling river. There's house decals along the side that they had to purposely take CPU cycles to render, and those are coming at you. The airplanes are coming at you. You're dipping and diving and dodging and shooting, and it's a good time. It's a very good time.
Yeah. I mean, I played this game for the first time on the C64 years later, and obviously by the time I played it must have been maybe 87, 88. It was already a very old game, but I knew it had been a VCS title before that, and I was still extremely impressed by that port. It holds up just in its simplicity, but it's really, just tight control, tight environments, really forcing you to make those decisions. Do I try to get in there for the fuel? And that moment when you're like almost on empty and you accidentally blow up the fuel cell. It's so hardcore.
Or purposefully.
Or purposely if you want the points, but I mean, right. Trust me, if you go beyond your 7 minutes, you're going to very quickly get to that moment when you're desperate for it's almost like when you're playing Tetris and you really, really need that long piece to, give yourself some breathing room, and suddenly you're like, where the frag is that fuel tank? And then you realize it's on the opposite side of the island or something, and you're like, no!
Just sweating bullets. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's
I know we've all been there. That's funny. I could totally see that, too. I could not put this one down. It was, in the video, you notice that there's kind of just a pause at the end there, because I figured we'd be talking about it, but I had to physically stop. Otherwise, I knew I was going to blow way past my 7 minutes.
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a sign that, well, I should say, that probably makes the next question completely superfluous, but would you recommend this to somebody who hasn't played the game before?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, on the 2600, I would say it's a very good showcase for it as well, in addition to just, it's a fun game. It's a good way to kill 7 minutes.
Yeah, and not just 7 minutes.
Exactly.
Yeah, and if you don't want to play the 2600 version, there's a 5200 version, Atari 8-bit computer versions, the Coleco got a version, like I said, the Commodore 64 got a version, and in television, MSX, old PCs, ZX Spectrum even gets a version, so yeah, you can play this game on almost anything nowadays. And I'm not completely familiar with all the differences. I do know the C64, there's bridges and there's tanks on the bridges and stuff. I'm not quite sure those are also available on the 2600. I may be wrong there. So, but
yeah, I'm looking to see if there's a version, because I would love to play this on a handheld. Apparently it's included on all the flashback consoles too. So this game made headlines when it came out.
Oh no, yeah, this game is going to be huge. It's going to sell like hotcakes. And well, we mentioned in the video, the designer Carol Shaw, also as one of the few female designers at the time, is also put front and center in the advertising. Then again, Activision always used the programmers and designers as one of their selling points. So, no, it's a fantastic game, and I'm going to just chime in also and say, play it if you haven't. Okay, so we still have so much show. But before we can turn on the time machine and head back, we need to check in with our good friend Ethan for the Department of Corrections to find out what I got wrong in our December 1982 episode.
Hello, this is a prepaid collect call from
the Department of Corrections.
This call is subject to recording and monitoring. To accept charges, press 1. You may start the conversation now.
Welcome back, Ethan. So
that's me.
Yeah, that's you. And I'm just going to put it up on top because we haven't been doing enough of this. You have a new series of documentary videos about video game history that we definitely should be promoting more here on the show.
Wow, I like
it. Give us the quick elevator pitch.
Play history. It's about early video games. Episode 5 ends with Pong. That's how early we're talking about.
Awesome. And that link will be in the show notes for everybody to check out. Okay.
Whee!
So, before we start talking about everything that I got wrong in our December 1982 episode, it's
the voter comment. Dun-dun-dum. Walter, don't ever say the GUIs are coming again. Just don't say it. You may not understand why, but just don't. Carl tricked you.
I didn't trick him. I thought that was funny. The GUIs are coming.
And you shouldn't say it either, Carl. just as an additional note.
Okay.
All right. Department of Corrections, December 1982. We're at the end of 1982. Can you believe it, folks?
It's almost like, we did 12 months worth of episodes plus 2 bonus episodes on the crash. Yeah, 82 is over. Jesus Christ.
Woo, woo, woo. Okay. So we're ready to close up the book on this year. Firstly, Velcro. It was brought up in the context of spaceflight, but it was not developed for spaceflight.
Oh.
It had already existed well prior to NASA doing some things. I'm sure they did some kind of improvement as related to it, but it already existed.
Cool. Good to know. Always had it as a space age thing, but yeah, it makes a lot of sense that it would be pre-existing.
The name was different. I think Velcro is the actual brand name that got kind of, loosened like Kleenex or something like that.
Or a zipper.
Yeah. But it was a something fastener. I can't remember exactly what it was. But that's not important. We're talking about video games here. And just like video games, let's talk about Laserdisc, which was not released in 1972. That was the announcement of Laserdisc.
Yeah. It was just the announcement that we were covering.
But you said it is now available, and that is right.
Okay, cool.
It takes another 6 years for it to come out, and
really?
I still don't know why. Yes,
Takes them 6 years.
Yes, because this was a subject in the book, I looked very deep into this. I contacted some resources, and I still don't know why it took that long. Especially because there was a working optical disc in 1961.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. It's a crazy, crazy bit, which I may have to cut out of the book, but it will still be around. But we'll get back to that another time.
Oh, man. Yes.
Let's actually move forward into 82. And talking about the VCS clones, or the 2600 clones. We can now call it the 2600 and not be anachronistic. Isn't that a glorious thing, Carl?
Woohoo!
There's no patent on the VCS that most companies would have been violating with making the clones in terms of internal architecture, because they didn't actually patent anything to do with the specific architecture of the VCS.
That sounds like a very long-term planning.
They may not have been able to. They did they patented the concept of sprites, but there's not really any evidence that they used that. There's evidence they used something on Atari Football, but anyways, patent violations. The patent that they were hoping would seal them was a design patent that the cartridge fitting into the cartridge slot. That's what Activision had to circumvent. That was the main thing.
Okay, just how it fitted into the slot.
Yeah. The system itself, aside from that little design bit, did not have that many patents protecting it.
Interesting.
Okay.
So, and this just came up in another context with the D&D Open Gaming License. And there's a good video on this by Legal Eagle.
Yes,
YouTube
but I have to note, before I get it too far, there are some people who have criticized that video in terms of the legal context of what he says, particularly at the end. I did watch that video, but continue on.
Okay, because the argument that he was making, I kind of bought into it. Now, obviously, the OGL... Yeah, okay. We can go on down. The OGL rabbit hole is something we don't need to be talking about right now.
Yeah, we'll bring it up next time you talk about D&D.
Exactly. There you go.
It's in the toy magazines.
Let's move on.
Next, Coca-Cola bought Columbia. That's why you were talking about Coca-Cola.
That's it. Yeah. And Columbia already owned Gottlieb at that point.
Yes. Columbia bought Gottlieb in 76, I believe, and then Coca-Cola bought Columbia 81, something like that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Then the Falcon was the video phone. The Atari Falcon, in this context, it was a video phone, and it came out under Mitsubishi in 1986 or something like that.
Yeah, I remembered it. There was something about it coming out, and I just couldn't remember the details.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next, another crash-related thing. Ray Kassar, in the investigation regarding his stock trading slightly prior to the announcement of the guidance of Warner's earnings, I have to be very specific. Alex is listening. He settled with the SEC without having to admit fault on that.
Okay.
A lot of
Probably
people
just
really
had to pay a
focus on
fine.
this in terms of, his culpability, whether he was doing things to undermine the company, but he was selling a very small number of shares, especially compared to Steve Ross, who earlier in the year sold way more shares than that. So, if there's anybody that should be looked at with a bit more scrutiny, then it should be Steve Ross, not Ray Kassar.
Gotcha.
Then, the AMOA is the Amusement and Music Operators of America.
I've done this 1,000 times, and for some reason I just can never remember that acronym.
Music, because jukeboxes are still important, guys, we promise. We'll talk about this when we talk.
Yeah.
Well, not in the 80s. No, not really anymore, because people aren't really, they're doing pipe music now. We might touch on this when we do the Arcade Crash episode.
That's true. That's coming.
Then Astron Belt. It is not a flight game. It is just a shooter game. It's not simulating flight.
Oh, that's true. It's not simulating flight, but it's a flight game in same vein as an Afterburner or Space Harrier.
Vaguely. There is probably some connective DNA between Astron Belt and Afterburner.
Well, I mean, if you compare screenshots on the ship design and the way the sprite is laid out between Astron Belt and Buck Rogers, there's clearly a DNA connection. And Buck Rogers, if you compare that with Space Harrier, there's clearly a connection.
Yes, the banded stripes on the surface of the planet are, clearly influence Space Harrier. I mean, that's a whole bit there. The entire idea of the scaling graphics games, Sega set up fairly early, but that's not what we're talking about. I would not call Astron Belt a flight game.
Yeah.
Though I think there is a difference between something like driving and racing, and there's a difference between a game in a plane and a game about flight.
This is true. I will concede that point.
Another point on Sega, they did not have upgrade kits.
Yeah.
They were interchangeable kits.
Yeah, conversion kits, not upgrade kits.
Because they did. Did they? No, I think actually Sega never put in this period put out a ROM revision of anything. A couple other companies were in this time though.
Well, I mean, we just had the Pac-Man upgrade, Pac-Man Plus, which was an upgrade kit. Yeah,
and there were others like there's a Star Castle one and things like that. Now, back onto Laserdisc. The first Laserdisc game commercially available to the public was the National First Video Kid Disc.
Woohoo!
Yes, it is something you could just play in a standard Laserdisc player. So that predates Murder Anyone, which you talked about. Again, this is something I did some very deep research into, and as far as I can tell, the National First Video Kid Disc is the first, and neither of them are interactive in the way that you would hope. They are like those VHS games. You have to pause and go to another segment of the thing. Then that's something that the Laserdisc had the capability to do. It could do perfect freeze frames and all that. And you were also wondering if Murder Anyone was on the internet, and indeed, here is your link.
Yes. And I watched it, and it's actually an interesting experience. I mean, it would have been fascinating at the time. Probably not that entertaining today. But the fact that they've got some somewhat passable actors in this and
better than
really
most
terrible
FMV
script.
games?
Oh, hell yes. Hell yes. I mean,
I'm surprised nobody dug this back up to port it to the Sega CD.
I can't imagine that they didn't try. There must have just been somebody either couldn't clear the rights or something else, because this would have been at home on the Sega CD. Or at least the Jaguar CD.
Oh, the Jaguar CD. Okay, lastly, your quote was, Z80 makes it less standardized than the 6502 machines.
And this was in the context of...
There was some computer release that you were talking about, but Z80 was in more computers than 6502.
But not in North America.
Yes.
As far as the North American market at that time, the Z80 machines were all but dead. I mean, the Trash 80 was the last one of any significance, and at this point in 82, you've got the VIC-20, the C64.
You're also saying that like these are you can't count the Commodore 64. That's a 6510 for one.
Yeah, but the 6510 as far
is not entirely compatible with the 6502.
Not entirely, but the machine code is virtually identical. I don't think there are any differences in the machine code language. It's just an issue of your memory addresses, and there's a couple of small
I'm willing
things,
to bet you, in terms of just machines on the ground, there were more Z80 machines than 6502 machines, because there had been a long lead on that.
Well, I mean, it would have just been the TRS-80. I mean, what other major machine was using a Z80?
The Timex Sinclair. It was selling a lot, man.
Nah, but they had just barely, after 2 years, they had reached the sales target of, I think, 700,000 machines.
Around there.
Yeah, but I mean, the VIC-20 beat that in a year. So, I mean, if you count that plus the pets that were out there and the Apple IIs, the Apple II is going to be hitting 1 million in a very short period of time. The Timex was...
But there were way more systems that were running off of Z80. Anyways, you're wrong. Okay. That's it. Department of Corrections closes up for December of 1982. But one last thing. I know, I should have done the Columbo thing. There are new sound effects.
Yes.
For 1983 and 1973.
73 too?
Yeah.
Oh,
hopefully you have a story for that.
Yes, we do. We have one story. And I really wish we hadn't already recorded the rest of the episode because I said there wasn't, but I will put that sound effect in.
All right. Woo-hoo. Here you go, guys.
Well, John still gets to say something before we play the sound effect.
Here you go, guys.
It works. In a minute. Okay. Bye, Ethan.
Bye.
Despite all those corrections, I have to say I'm loving all the Laserdisc love in there. Any excuse to talk about them.
Oh, yeah. No, the Laserdisc thing, I mean, we've talked about it a lot over the last year or so, especially in the 40-year jump, different attempts to make games using that mass storage medium. And the biggest one is yet to come, and it's coming this year. It's right on the cusp, and I've talked about it on the show before, and I'll talk about it more. It is the game that gets me into games. I mean, without that, I don't know if I'd be recording this today or if I would have really given a rat's ass about video games. But Dragon's Lair is coming, people. It's coming. So,
man,
okay.
That's a scary alternate timeline.
It is a very weird timeline. What would have become of Carl if not for computers? That is weird. Probably be doing a podcast about movie history or some nonsense like that. No, just kidding. Not nonsense. That would have been cool too. But no. Okay, so it's time. Let's turn on the time machine and head back. Well, we'll start off 50 years ago with January of 1973.
The marriage of traditional pinball machines and computer technology.
1973. An unsavory type of play.
John, what's our only story?
Pong doing well.
In one of the first mentions of Atari's new game, a quick anecdote in this month's Cashbox, Trade Magazine mentions that Portale Automatic is reporting good seasonal earnings from Pong.
Now, is this that? I guess the picture that comes to my head for Atari. So, is this home Pong or is this?
No, this is arcade Pong.
Arcade Pong.
So,
yeah. So that's the one with the big dome-shaped weirdness.
No, that's Computer Space.
Okay.
Yeah, so that came out the year before.
Got it.
And Pong is basically a wooden box with yellow highlights and the 2 dials to control the paddles. Yeah, and so I haven't seen, I'm not saying that I may have missed something, but I haven't seen an official grand announcement for Pong yet. But there's this tiny little mention here in Cashbox, because every month in Cashbox, which is a magazine for the coin-operated device, primarily jukebox crowd.
Got it.
But they have a couple pages in the back always for games, and they've got these breakdowns, of things that they've heard, and it's mostly just, so-and-so's going on vacation, or so-and-so's doing this or that. But there's this one line about Pong. Atari's Pong is doing very well. And then they immediately throw in, but the other guys' machines are doing well too. So, the Pong craze is yet to come. Now granted, the Magnavox Odyssey, that went on sale last year. So it went on sale in 72. Nolan Bushnell, we talked about this last year, saw it, signed a guest book saying that he saw it, and now we've got Pong, a few months later, hitting the arcades, or hitting at least the coin-op routes. Probably not in full production yet, and all the clones, which is really what's going to popularize it, haven't hit yet, and we're still quite a ways away from home Pong. But yes, the video game coin-op revolution has begun.
I was about to say the calm before the storm, or at least
This is just
magazines.
This is one little. I mean, this month they're actually advertising these giant, gun shooting games that are all electromechanical and stuff like that. That's still the world we're in. Solid state pinball is still relatively new.
I watched. Is that? I think it's Day of the Dead, the one where they're in the mall. That's awful. I should know this. Jeff is gonna kill me.
That's Dawn of the Dead.
Dawn of the Dead. Yeah, they're in the mall, and there's it's a car racing game, but you can see the pieces are not like a display. It's actually physically moving pieces.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and this kind of game is going to last well into the late 70s, and I even saw an ad for one of those, or introduction of one of those a year or two ago in the 40-year jump. So even in the early 80s, there's still a little bit of that roaming around.
Got it.
Yeah. I mean, because the graphics on video games haven't gotten there yet.
Exactly. Yeah, I hadn't put a lot of thought into electromechanical games until I had seen I had seen that recently, and I was like, whoa, that went down a rabbit hole. Speaking of our current rabbit holes, it's like the Tiger Electronics all over again. But electromechanical games are a very, very complicated thing, and it's going to be something that will obviously get replaced almost entirely by video, but we've talked about it also here on the show. There's still some games that are taking elements from the electromechanical, the entire idea of putting the screen not directly where the viewer is looking at the screen, but putting it receded in the cabinet and then projecting that, mirroring it off of a mirror so that the player sees the mirror reflection, and then combining it with other effects like light strobes or whatever else you're going to do, is extremely common in this period of time. For the reason that, that's just kind of what a lot of these guys are used to doing. It's also a way of getting, the screen to maybe feel bigger and adding other effects. The people putting this stuff together are coming from a world where that was what was necessary to make the games work. And the idea of just, showing you that blanket screen for quite a few people for a while is going to just feel a little anathema. But
Okay, enough about electromechanical. That's not what we're here for. Let's turn on the time machine and head back to January of 1983.
Business has dropped in half over the past year. 1983.
Certain types of games.
Business is like sex.
hit its peak.
Welcome back to January of 1983. John, what's our first story?
Well, I found some quarters through this time jump, so I think we're going to start talking about coin-op games. Retailers rethink games.
While the addition of coin-operated games has been a boom to many retailers during the recession years of the early 80s, the massive decrease in revenue plus additional costs of policing arcade areas of their stores has turned some retailers off of games. Retailers like Kmart have used some of the space normally reserved for big-ticket items like appliances, which haven't been selling well during the economic downturn, into arcade spaces, while drugstores and supermarkets have seen the machines as cheap new sources of revenue and traffic. The higher cost of policing and dwindling revenue has meant that some chains like Genovese drugstores are seriously considering removing the machines.
That's really interesting. Yeah, what was once a cash cow for him is starting to be a big eyesore.
It's starting to become a bit of an eyesore. It's less of an eyesore and more of it's costing more money than it's worth.
Sure.
Because remember, what has happened over the last 2 years is also the fact that kids are getting tired of the games a lot faster. They're demanding more and more changeover, and if it isn't a high traffic or high volume coin drop location, the operators aren't willing to put in their best machines. And, if you've got this system sitting here, you've got kids coming in, you've got to constantly throw them out if they're coming in during school hours and stuff. It's just a bigger pain in the ass than it's worth. And we can't forget that there's also a lot of pressure from a lot of these communities, to limit the games. And if you're a supermarket or some other place that has a family image, and we've talked about this on the show before, how, that decision, do I make the extra money or do I possibly gather some ire from pissed off parents or something? Those are decisions that the individual retailers have to make. For many, the decision was always, well, if it's making enough money, who cares? But now that money is also disappearing as the arcade slump or coin-op slump continues. And so it's interesting to see this. And this comes all from a New York Times article. So it's gotten mainstream. It's not just, people sending disappointed letters into a trade magazine.
Yeah, or like the City Gazette mentioning about...
Yeah, exactly.
Their local drugstore.
Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, now we're talking chains. We're talking, dozens and dozens, or if not hundreds of locations. That makes a huge difference. I mean, it's big. It's corporate at this point. But speaking of limitations on the machines.
Absolutely. Nassau County wants big money from operators.
A legal battle is heating up in the New York State Legislature as representatives from Nassau County, Nassau? I have no idea, have asked that their $25 per machine per year tax on coin-op games be raised to $100.
Ooh.
Yeah.
4 times for what return?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, if you're think a new machine costs about $3,000.
Yep.
And I'm spitballing. I mean, obviously there's big differences here, but $3,000. You're lucky at this point if you're going to be able to recoup that money in the first year. And on top of that, you've got to now pay $100 on a machine that's basically going to have expired its functional life. before the year is up, and you may even be replacing it after 9 months, which means you're going to be paying this $100 tax more frequently for the next machine. Yeah, this is just not tenable.
Yeah, that sustainability. Maybe this next article will help. SNK sells direct to operators.
SNK has heard the complaints of coin-op operators and has decided to bypass the dealer infrastructure by releasing Lasso, the first game of theirs they will distribute themselves in North America directly to operators. A full cab will cost $1,500, a conversion kit $695, and a PC board just $375. The low cost is definitely a portent of SNK trends to come.
Good on SNK for cluing into that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, and this is coming on the heels of Sega being a big promoter of the conversion kits. And the fact that the distributor chain it basically costs a lot of money. Now, distributors would argue that they're offering a very valuable service. You know, if you need a repair, do you really want to be sending it back across country or waiting for SNK to help out? But, I mean, ultimately, these cabinets, especially if you're doing conversion kits, means that you don't get a warranty on the joysticks. You don't, which is the thing that's probably going to break down first. The cabinet is going to be reused multiple times for different games. So, what support is the dealer giving you other than maybe some chips blow out on the motherboard? But those are going to have to just be replaced by mail anyway, so now you just got to wait for those to come in. And I think a lot of the operators have also gotten to the level of sophistication where they can do a lot of these repairs themselves. So it's an idea whose time has come. Now we will see, as everybody who's been listening to the 30-year jumps knows, the distributors are not going anywhere. This is not an idea that's going to take off. But it is a sign that SNK is looking for those low-cost solutions, and of course, their most famous product, the Neo Geo, is the ultimate exercise of that.
Yeah, that definitely fits SNK's MO for that. Yeah, I didn't think about because it's kind of like, buying something with insurance and paying a maintenance versus just buying the thing straight out and good luck.
Exactly. And that is part of it. I mean, granted, they're still giving warranties and stuff, but SNK is not going to have, a service department out in Nebraska, so.
Right, yeah, what is that? I'm trying to think of the official term. It's like, parts and labor. Versus,
exactly.
Upkeep and... Yeah.
Yeah, you got a drivetrain warranty, but everything else is on you.
Yeah, the however many miles warranty. Neat. Well, moving from coin-op, let's get a little intellectual. Japan recognizes game copyrights.
Oh, yeah. Taito has beaten ING Enterprises, a company that had made copies of Space Invaders Part 2 in a Tokyo district court. The court recognized that the game was the creation of original and creative thought, and therefore should be protected by copyright law. This came shortly after a ruling in another case concerning a Space Invaders copier, in which Japan's unfair competition prevention law was found to apply to video games when consumers would be confused by the infringing products and not be able to tell them apart.
So this is in relation to a direct copy versus something that's kind of a knockoff.
Now,
the two?
How big, whether or not they were copying the ROM directly, or if they were just making a game that looked very, very similar or had made minor modifications to it, I don't know. But these two cases together, and I do think the first one was a straight-up copy. They probably just changed the names or something.
Yeah.
Which was not uncommon at this point. We've talked about those before, especially in England, where up until recently, they also had the same situation where it wasn't clear whether or not the law copyright law applied to video games. because that was a big debate at the time, because traditionally copyright was the specific expression of an idea was protected. So, the individual frames of a movie or the individual notes of a song. But video games were this weird gray zone at the beginning because, well, every time you played it, it was a different set of images on the screen. So, since you were creating a different set of images, was the player, did they have some right to the copyright? And so forth. And that's been cleared up in North America, but Japan and Europe were very late to this game. And so now it's been dealt with in Japan, and this is very big because almost all of the copycat boards, the clone boards, and so forth are coming out of Japan. So now there's actually going to be some legal foundation for fighting that, and hopefully that will also stop those kind of boards from making it to Europe, where the coin-op business has really been suffering, and North America.
Right. Yeah, that's it's setting a lot of interesting precedents, and this is kind of the hotbed time for it. It'd be different than if someone was copying a Pong machine way back when. Now it's a little more substantial.
Oh, definitely. I mean, and it's mainly happening because it's such a big business at this point. There's so much money involved.
Absolutely. Everybody wants a piece.
Yeah. But we see how old this is. Space Invaders Part 2 is already several years old, and the guys who are copying Space Invaders itself, I mean, these cases take forever to go through the courts.
Very true. Huh. All right, well, moving on the other side of the pond, Bally Midway wins pillow fight.
Bally Midway has won a $500,000 judgment against Fable Toys, a Brooklyn-based toy company that was selling, quote, Moon Man, end quote, pillows that looked very much like Pac-Man, but were not Pac-Man. A jury didn't buy it and saw the resemblance to Pac-Man. They also didn't buy the defendant's argument that Pac-Man couldn't be copyrighted or trademarked.
Oops.
Yeah.
Man over pillows, too. That's incredible.
Yeah, I actually covered this case, or a very similar case, and I gotta wait and see. I don't have my old papers anymore, but when I was in undergrad in college for my legal business law class, I actually did a report on the legal history of the video game industry and covered one of these pillow cases.
Oh,
and,
wow.
Because, I mean, it's basically make a Pac-Man shaped pillow. You can call it a block of, a wheel of cheese with one wedge missing.
Yep.
Or Moon Man. Now, I didn't get to see an actual picture of the Moon Man pillows, but, so Bally is pushing and making sure that their merchandise empire, we talked about this a couple months ago, I think in the November jump, that they just had their own conference with 1,000 licensees there or something ungodly like that. Yeah, there's every product under the sun has been turned into a Pac-Man product. So, and speaking of which...
Right, exactly. Well, before we move on to that, I just want to say whoever wrote this title, hell yeah. Like somebody was sitting there, arms crossed, leaning back in their chair, like, let's just publish it. This is great. All right, well, continuing on. Pac-Mania continues.
Fleer Corporation, licensor of Pac-Man for bubblegum, stickers, candy, and lollipops, paid Bally $600,000 in royalties on their $20 million in Pac-Man-related revenue and expect to pay Bally upwards of $1 million as the phenomenon continues. This comes as early viewership figures for ABC's Pac-Man cartoon seem to be beating last year's top kid show, The Smurfs.
Oh man, is this the beginning of the onslaught of video game-based cartoons too?
Oh yes. So Pac-Man's the floodgate. After this, we're going to get Q*bert. We're going to get Dragon's Lair. We're going to get Mario and Donkey Kong. We're going to get, Pitfall Harry gets a cartoon. I mean, a lot of these are not independent 30-minute shows. There's a block of them, or multiple blocks of cartoons where, they'll do like 5 15-minute episodes and stuff, or whatever the format is. But yeah, this is all gonna spring from the Pac-Man well.
Very cool. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I wonder do we know who's behind some of these right now?
Well, Pac-Man is a Hanna-Barbera. Okay. And I don't know who does wait, this is an IMDb question.
Yeah,
so we
fair.
can do Q*bert.
I almost said Hanna-Barbera when I asked the question, but I didn't want to just throw that out there because being a little bit on the older side, like I didn't know, or the younger side, I guess, in this perspective, I didn't want to just be like, everything's Hanna-Barbera. Let's do it.
Yeah, it's not all Hanna-Barbera, but at this point in time, Saturday Morning is Hanna-Barbera and Rankin Bass are the two big ones. Rankin Bass, for example, is going to do the Dragon Slayer cartoon.
Ooh.
But I don't know. I'm looking up Q*bert because that's Saturday Supercade was the name of the bigger show.
Oh, I just came across that name recently. I want to track down some episodes, see what that's about.
Oh yeah, no, it's terrible.
Is it bad? Oh no.
Oh, it's worse than bad. It's just really, really terrible.
Of course, that means I have to check it out now.
Well, of course. I mean, the Q*bert cartoon basically is Happy Days with Q*bert wearing a Letterman jacket with a Q on it.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's
that is tremendous.
It makes no goddamn sense. Okay, the Supercade stuff is just so weird. I'm trying to find out what else was in the Saturday Supercade. 1 second. But who made it?
Ruby Spears Productions?
Ruby Spears could very well be, yeah.
I'm on the wiki page.
Okay, then you're way ahead of me. Yeah, that Ruby Spears would make sense. Ruby Spears were originally the creators of, amongst others, Scooby-Doo. Then they went off and did their own thing. They did, I think, the Teen Car one. The Teenager Tunes into a Car was one of theirs. The Plastic Man Comedy Hour was also theirs. Donkey Kong Jr. is on there.
Yeah, I see Frogger, Donkey Kong Jr., Pitfall Harry, like you mentioned, Kangaroo, and the Monkey Business Gang.
Oh, wow, they used Kangaroo? We just had that game, Mads played it on a 7 Minutes in Heaven not too long ago. I mean...
Oh, neat.
That was I want to say more or less a flash in the pan, but then again, you don't know ahead of time when you are making these shows,
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think I came across it because they did do Donkey Kong, and this was the first, and correct me if I'm wrong, I know you're listening, the first Mario appearance in some of these cartoons over this side of the pond.
Yeah, and it's probably also before he shows up in Japan, because I think the earliest Japanese one is based off Super Mario Brothers.
Oh, so, yeah, very well could be. Okay.
Yeah, so we are definitely ahead of that over at this point.
Very cool.
Whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. But,
we'll leave
these are pretty
to...
terrible. If you go on YouTube, you can find a bunch of this stuff.
Oh, you see how we get on rabbit holes here?
Yeah, it's terrible. I'm going to have to cut some of this crap out.
Nah, leave it in. It'll be fine. But let's at least use it as a segue to talk about content coming to the home. Winter CES sees the rise of software providers.
Oh, yes. The New York Times reports that companies producing software for home computers, as opposed to the machines themselves, was the big trend of the Winter CES. Standard bearer is Disney's entry into the home microsoftware market and the fact that software sales make up 25% of the revenue for the industry, while 50% is peripherals. Video game software is still expected to do well, but has lost some of its luster. Arnie Katz of Electronic Games Magazine commented that many software providers previously only active in the computer space were getting into video games while video game companies were starting to make computer games.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess, yeah, it makes sense that peripherals would take up that bigger chunk, but I figured software would drive most of that. I guess it's the higher barrier to entry to actually make something physical versus just releasing ones and zeros.
Well, I mean, just think about how, right at this point in time, disk drives can be way more expensive than the computer itself. And printers are horrendously expensive. Decent ones. So those two peripherals alone will set you back because the computer is just the CPU at this point. In most cases.
Right.
Yeah. So, and things like, memory expansions, modems, all this stuff are out there and starting to take off.
Got it. Yeah, I guess again, this is thinking early computers. I don't have a very good window. I'm glad I can peek out of the time machine a bit and get that experience for that. And it's an exciting time being in January with it being CES.
Oh, yeah. Well, and this is also where the format of the show, and I didn't do the warning for the first time in a while. Remember, everybody, we're using the cover dates on magazines, so while the crash happened in December, a lot of the magazines still haven't quite caught up. There's a few mentions that I don't think we go into it here this episode, but there are a few mentions of Atari stock dropping, but most of the magazines that are dated January haven't really understood the full effect because they're not covering the entire month of December like we did last month here on the show. And the newspapers like the New York Times that are covering the CES, they're not really covering it in great depth. So we're going to talk a bunch of CES stuff today, but we're probably also going to be looking at more detailed CES reporting next month as those articles start to hit the trade press. But it's still interesting to get the New York Times view of this because as more and more people are buying computers, remember the VIC-20 has already sold 1 million units, and the other machines have really been taking off over the Christmas season, that software need is going to increase dramatically. And so we're going to have to see how that develops over the next year or so. And I should also mention here that this was also a fun little thing. IBM breaks with their tradition and has reserved a major booth at CES. Now, they're not talked about in the New York Times articles, but this is previewed in one of the magazines. Remember, everything we're talking about, links are in the show notes. And this is fueling a lot of speculation that they might be introducing a true home computer as opposed to their multi-$1,000 IBM PC. So everybody's on pins and needles to see if IBM's going to be entering the home market. Yeah,
that's a big move for IBM.
Yeah, it will be, and it'll be a disaster. It's going to be known as the PC Junior. Yeah, that's another... We're still a couple years away from that.
I was about to say we haven't gotten that far yet.
No, that is still coming because, they're going to drop the ball on that one.
Oof. All right, well, moving between booths here. Repackaged consoles to debut at CES.
Both Mattel's Intellivision and Magnavox's Odyssey are to get revamped versions at CES. The Intellivision 2 will boast a cost-reduced design, keyboard add-on still coming, perhaps. The Odyssey Command Center is the Odyssey 3 we talked about a few months ago. It will get a proper typewriter keyboard, modem upgrade, and enhanced graphics while still being backward compatible with the Odyssey 2. So, do you remember the Odyssey 3?
No, I don't remember. Well, I know of the Odyssey. I didn't even know there was an Intellivision 2. Oh, God.
There is an Intellivision 2. It's the same exact thing, just cost reduced.
Got it.
And it will get a keyboard add-on that is very different from the keyboard add-on for the original one. Still basically a disaster. And and the Odyssey 3, there's going to be a prototype, but it's never actually going to hit the market because, well, the market is collapsing. And by the time it would have hit the market, yeah, that would have been a bad idea. So the Odyssey 3 is not going to get released, unfortunately.
Huh. Alternate timelines, man.
Yeah. I mean, it could have been interesting, but from the imagery that's out there, it wouldn't have been enough of an upgrade over the original Odyssey 2 to really make a difference.
Oh, I got it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Cool. Well, moving on from hardware to software, big names are being attracted to games.
The hype around games knows no end. New York Times reports that big names and big money are being poured into video games. Star Wars VFX artist John Dykstra is making games for Coleco and John Madden for CBS. Licenses from movies and arcade games are also going crazy, with Parker Brothers allegedly setting a record, paying $2 million for the rights to Popeye, plus $4 per cartridge. Donkey Kong console ports have reportedly already made Nintendo $5 million in royalties. Movie-based games aren't faring as well as the sophistication of consumers grows, and word of mouth is leaving less than spectacular titles to gather dust or be bought by grandmothers, but Parker Brothers is still betting on them with more Star Wars games, including 2 planned titles for Revenge of the Jedi, Star Wars Jedi Arena, a James Bond game, plus Spider-Man, Incredible Hulk, G.I. Joe, Strawberry Shortcake, and a series of Lord of the Rings titles. Parker also snagged the license to the upcoming hit game Q*bert.
If you read that list in relation to like a PS2 release, I would believe it the same way. It's interesting that all of these
Properties.
IPs are, all these properties are just still relevant even at this time period. That's super cool to see.
It is really, really scary, yeah. So the big one here that really deserves mentioning is that John Madden is signed up to make a game for CBS. And the game obviously never appears, but the fact that apparently there was a plan to license Madden for a football game before EA shows up is interesting, and I'd love to know how far that actually got and the reaction of the Madden people to the EA offer and whether or not it was influenced in any way. Fascinating story. If there is a story to tell. The John Dykstra game, he is going to work on games later. He's actually going to be involved with Night Trap. But nothing is going to come out of his work with Coleco as far as I can tell.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know him from his work from that, and I guess, did he work on Sewer Shark too?
I believe so, yes. I think he's also involved with Sewer Shark.
Okay.
Which makes sense given his VFX background.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, I love that those games leaned a lot on practical effects. There was a lot of matting going on there with how they had to mix the graphics, but yeah, it's just a fascinating time.
Oh yeah. Now the big thing here, those titles that Parker Brothers wanted to bring out, obviously a lot of them don't come out. They only release one Revenge of the Jedi. It's still called Revenge of the Jedi at this point. The Return of the Jedi will be the later title. But they do release one Return of the Jedi game. The second one, which was something to do with the Ewoks dropping stones on AT-ATs and stuff, that never shows up. That there's artwork for it, but it never comes out. The Incredible Hulk game never gets a release. Only the Spider-Man one does. Strawberry Shortcake, I don't know if that gets released. The G.I. Joe one does, but oh my god, that's bad. And the Lord of the Rings series of games also never come out. There's cover artwork, but no actual game gets made. I think there was a prototype or a beta version got leaked years ago, but the actual commercial game never gets released.
Oh, wow. Ewok Adventure has a prototype for the 2600 that had been released.
Oh, really? Oh, cool. Yeah, I knew that there was... I've seen artwork for it and screenshots, but I didn't know if there was an actual ROM release.
I was just thinking the concept of Ewoks dropping rocks on the chicken walkers was... that actually sounds like a pretty good time.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a terrible concept. The only problem is I can imagine it gets a little old fast. I mean,
that's true.
It would be coming out like almost a year after River Raid, and so I mean, it would have the strength of the license, but at the same time, you know, is that enough to justify it?
But it's the cute little Ewoks.
You know what? I'm not going to argue with that at the time, because as much as they are maligned today, at the time we thought they were really cool, and it supported at least 2, if not 3 Ewok movies after that, and a cartoon show, so obviously there was something to it, and I remember thinking the Ewoks were cool as a kid. So, just like Scrappy-Doo gets a lot of flack, but without Scrappy-Doo, Scooby-Doo would have been canceled, and Scrappy-Doo kept him on the air for another year or so. So it's all good. Okay, that's just going way
yeah,
off
I gotta get
tangents.
us off TV shows.
Yeah. But one other thing I wanted to talk about was the understanding here. The Popeye arcade game is a Nintendo title. Donkey Kong has also made them a ton of money. I mean, it's basically... If Nintendo wasn't thinking of getting into video games, console games themselves, these numbers, they must be just kicking themselves going, we made $5 million off of Donkey Kong on the consoles, but holy crap, if we had just released the cartridge ourselves, you know, it would have been a freaking field day.
Yeah.
And, obviously the crash is coming. That $4 per cartridge, if that's really what Parker Brothers needed to pay, wow, that could really burn them if the cartridges don't sell and get discounted.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, putting what is it?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the saying ahead of the horse.
Oh, putting the cart ahead of the horse.
That's the one.
Yeah, I mean, and Popeye it's not that great of a game, unfortunately. I mean,
putting the Popeye ahead of the spinach.
Oh, I love it. Yes, I love it. Well done.
Thank you. Well, speaking of discounts, buy 2, get 1 free is the post-Christmas slogan.
Yes. Atari, Activision, iMagic, and even fledgling CBS have all announced buy 2, get 1 offers to help clean out the inventory glut in the cartridge market. Only Coleco seems to be above the fray. Arnold Greenberg, head of Coleco, even warns against stock balancing schemes proposed by some manufacturers whereby retailers would be able to trade in an existing game from their inventory when buying 2 new games. This, he says, will be a major problem with the real shakeout in the market hits.
That's interesting. So this isn't at the consumer level, this is at the retailer level.
And there's actually a story that we're going to do very, very late. There's a bunch of retail stories coming later. Okay. But I thought I'd include the buy 2, get 1 here, but we're going to talk about it later. And if you've listened to our 2-part Crash episodes, this topic was a major topic that we discussed there. Alex Smith went into great detail on it. So the problem is that there's a ton of extra software out there, because in 1981, Christmas of 81, they couldn't produce enough cartridges to satiate demand. Also remember, there's really only Activision as a third party and Atari, so VCS software was limited to those 2 companies in 81. There's one other company, but it didn't really count. And coming into 82, there's literally dozens of companies, hundreds of cartridges. The manufacturing problems that plagued Activision and Atari the previous year are no longer there. They're producing more than they possibly could want. And Atari did the stupid thing of forcing all the retailers to put in their orders almost a year in advance, you know, and since everybody was like, well, it's going to be tight market again, we'll just order a ton of stuff. And instead of, you know, I need 50, so I'll order 100 so I can get half my order. They order 100, and now they got 100, even though they only needed 50. Oh, wait, now there's even more companies, so now I only need 20. And so, yeah, this is one of the ways to try to get rid of those cartridges that did not sell, and the stock balancing thing would be that now the publishers are stuck with the cartridges, which is going to cause them to not know where to go with it, unless, of course, you have a landfill someplace in the New Mexican desert.
There it is. I was waiting for it. Apparently, September might be the call for that.
It's coming. That and many other, but we're going to talk a little bit more detail because there is an extra layer to this problem that gets highlighted in a very specialized trade magazine, and we'll talk about that later on when we talk about the what's going on in the retail space in more detail in a later segment.
Got it. All right. Milton Bradley buys Sanders license.
Milton Bradley has bought a license to use technology patented by Sanders Associates through Magnavox. The patents will allow them to continue to make video games.
What's a Sanders Associate?
Okay, Sanders Associates was the company that developed what was then would become the Odyssey, the original video game console.
Okay.
And they had the patents to things like, for example, object on the screen touches another object on the screen and it bounces off or moves from there into another direction.
Got it.
Basically Pong. But that idea of the reflecting is one of the key patents that they got. And everybody who wants to do two objects colliding and bouncing are going to have to pay. Activision has to pay ultimately because of their game like hockey. But they're going to be the last big holdout. They're going to wait too long, and it's ultimately going to cost them a fortune. And we've talked about it on our 30-year jumps.
Okay.
A few years ago. And it's not the only thing that kills Activision, but it's definitely the straw that breaks the camel's back and leads to Bobby Kotick saving Activision.
Oh, wow, okay. Man, that's a hell of a patent to have, though.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. I mean, every game console up through the Sega Genesis, and I don't know if the Super Nintendo was still covered by it or not, or if they slid under the wire. But yeah, everybody basically had to pay.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And it was owned by, they had sub-licensed it to Magnavox, who made the Odyssey, and Magnavox was bought by Philips, so Philips was holding this for the longest time. Fun stuff.
Fair.
But Milton Bradley, this is showing up in real magazines and stuff and newspapers that Milton Bradley has bought this license.
Yeah, that's good hype for them.
Yeah.
Like, oh, hey, they can continue doing what they're doing.
Exactly. They won't get sued like some other people.
Yeah. What's that about? All right, well, talking about people doing what they're doing, that's the worst segue yet. iManage settles with Atari.
I'm not disagreeing with you on that. So, Atari filed a suit against iMagic claiming that their game Demon Attack infringed on Phoenix, an arcade game Atari had licensed and was soon to be released on the 2600. The two parties have settled the dispute without disclosing terms, but iMagic will continue to sell their game. So, okay, I should probably explain. Phoenix is an arcade space shooter where you're shooting these giant birds. And then there's an end-of-level boss segment where you basically have to shoot a path through to an eyeball or something at the top of the screen. And there's, this constantly self-curing bottom part of the ship that you have to, be constantly shooting through to build a path to get your shot through to the main segment. And Demon Attack, it replicates a lot of this.
Oh, interesting. It's so close that they're like, wait a minute.
Yeah, wait a sec. Yeah, we paid good money for the Phoenix license, and we want to release it on the 2600, and you came along and made basically the same game already. I'm not saying it's the same game. There's differences. And at least one of the gaming magazines even named Demon Attack the #1 console game of the year. I mean, it's a big, huge seller.
Mm-hmm.
So they sued them. Whatever iMagic paid, if anything, was apparently worth it because they're going to port Demon Attack to all the other consoles now and to some home computers. But, yeah, we don't know what the terms were, or if the terms were Atari admits defeat right out of the gate. We don't know.
Right, exactly. You have to wonder if it's one of those things, too, where they decided that a settlement's better than a drawn-out litigation.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Or even worse, losing.
Yes, exactly, that, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, risk first reward there.
Yeah, exactly. So,
yeah, sounds like playing more conservatively. iMagic delays stock offering.
iMagic has delayed its planned IPO to sometime in early 1983. They had hoped to become the first independent maker of console games to go public, but Atari's shaking of the market has scuttled those plans for now.
I'm trying to think. I don't know a lot about iMagic. Obviously, we all know about Atari.
Well, iMagic is just like Activision, a company formed by a bunch of former Atari programmers.
Ah, okay.
Well, because you have to remember, there's no third parties, and the only people who really had a lot of experience making games for the VCS were the Atari guys. And since Ray Kassar refused to allow these guys any credit, they weren't getting paid any royalties. I mean, they were making games that were generating tens of millions of dollars in revenue, if not profit, and getting like a basic salary of $40,000 a year or something.
Oof.
And I'm making up some of these numbers, but the general gist is the correct one. And so they're going off on their own and starting these companies. So iMagic is a big one at this point. Only problem is, of course, that, the market's about to collapse. So, woohoo!
Yeah, great timing.
Yeah. Interesting little side note here on top of this, and this is just kind of weird, but I thought it was an interesting development. iMagic has introduced a new in-store display system that allows players to have a time-restricted playtest of a game before buying. The system cart connects remotely to a docking station that can house up to 24 VCS carts that the potential buyer can then cycle through with a button without ever getting close to the actual cartridges.
That's neat. This must have been one of the early efforts to... Yeah, because we're used to demo kiosks now, but I guess that was still being... developed out.
Exactly. I mean, there were these kiosks. You can see pictures of them online and so forth, where you'd have, like a clear plastic bubble over the VCS. At least that's how I've interpreted the images. I might be wrong just because, you can't see exactly what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you could play the one game, but most of the displays in the stores are just the VCS is sitting there and you've got the cartridge on the top. And I can imagine a lot of people were just stealing the cartridges because these were regular carts. You know? And so this system gives you the option of, number one, you have the carts in some back area, or, behind the wall or whatever, so nobody can get access to them. You can now demonstrate up to 24 games on the same system, and you don't have the problem of the kids sitting there playing the game all day long because there's a time restriction on it.
Yeah, that time limit definitely jumps out, because that's a custom solution to design around something like that, which is really smart from the store display side.
Oh, exactly. And we're going to see an interesting version of this, if you will, on the computer side a little bit later in the show. And it's really a sign of the maturing of the market. Mm-hmm. That, everything is getting more standardized. The problems are slowly being ironed out and turned into the market that we will know 10 years later. So it's very cool to see these little baby steps as the whole thing keeps moving on.
Exactly.
Yeah. And just as another side note on iMagic before we move on, they've announced that they're going multi-platform, with games being either ported or developed specifically for, these are the platforms they're planning on covering: VCS, the Atari 8-bit computers, the VIC-20, the Odyssey 2, the ColecoVision, and the TI-99 4A. So this is a big swath of machines that they want to cover.
Yeah, that's a hell of a spread.
Yeah. And this is also where a lot of them are going to discover computers. There's a lot of them, but they don't necessarily make as much money as the consoles. Piracy.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, speaking of spreading, Custer's Revenge resolution goes to court.
Oh, dude, that's so nasty. Okay.
Am I allowed to do that?
You're allowed to do it.
All right.
But, that's so wrong. So wrong. Anybody who doesn't know what Custer's Revenge is, just pause here, go and Google video of it, and then come back. Sorry, there was a
or
weird...
don't.
Or don't, yeah.
Or don't.
Don't, yeah, probably don't. There was a really, really nasty... I mean, the trade magazines, especially the coin-op trade magazines, are extremely conservative. We've talked about this a few times on the show before. They're extremely conservative. I mean, it's like reading GOP propaganda at times. Yeah. And the way that they interpreted Custer's Revenge, because the coin-op people are very, very touchy about government interference, having to pay higher taxes per machine, restrictions on where they can put their machines, people worried about violence and kids not coming in. Basically, they feel like they're always the scapegoat for the morality police or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so the way that they described Custer's Revenge in one of the magazines is, a naked cowboy running towards a willing Indian maiden. Yeah, she's clearly tied to a post. She is not a willing maiden under any circumstances. The Braves are shooting arrows at him to stop him from raping the woman, and he's avoiding the arrows. Sorry. I just had to get that out of my system. It's been sticking in my craw for weeks now. But, okay. So, back to the story. Resolution goes to court. The makers of Custer's Revenge, American Multiple Industries, have filed an $11 million lawsuit against Suffolk County and Representative Philip Nolan over a resolution that banned that game and similar games due to its promotion of criminal activity. Now, we talked about this proposal a couple months ago here on the show, so now there's an actual lawsuit coming out of that proposed law.
Where's Philip Nolan coming from?
He's just a local politician who has decided, we do not need this game on the shelves in our town. The other game that he uses as an example is Firebug from Muse Software, which has, by the time he's bringing it up, has already been taken off the market and rebranded. The game is not using the high-res, but the low-res graphic mode on the Apple II. It's basically just a block and some other blocks. It's supposed to be originally that you are an arsonist setting fires in these buildings, so you got to put, your fire bombs in the right locations in order to blow up each floor of the building. But it's impossible to actually tell what it is, and so they just renamed it as, I can't remember what exactly, and now I think you're supposed to be a fly picking off bugs or something. I don't know. But it's the exact same game with just a different title screen.
Interesting.
So, yeah. I mean, that's the beauty of when your graphics are that primitive. It can be anything you want, as we will see with a console in a few stories. But yeah, so that's what's going on there. Now, as a side note here, this article from the New York Times also makes clear that AMI no longer owns the right to the game. They've sold their adult games, because they had a whole bunch of them, we've talked about them before, to another company, the reason given by them was, quote, too many headaches. So the games did not prove profitable enough in comparison with how much pain in the ass they had to deal with from it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, definitely.
Right, we're continuing on the Custer's Revenge train. Custer's Revenge discontinued.
JHM Limited, the Hong Kong-based maker of Custer's Revenge, has announced that they have moved distribution of the title to a company called GameSource, which distributes adult movies and will continue to sell games such as Bachelor Party and Beat 'em and Eat 'em, but not Custer's Revenge due to the non-consensual nature of the interactions.
Yeah, those, I guess our previous note and this one, I guess, you create enough around that the companies get a little antsy publishing something like that.
Ultimately, it's not worth it. I think that's the big one. Ultimately, the profit from doing it was completely and utterly outweighed by the losses that were incurred from probably not being able to get into the stores that you want to get into, or just having to deal with potential legal problems. I mean, if you're taking something to trial, you're paying lawyers, that's costing you money.
Absolutely. Lawyers.
Speaking of, yes.
Yeah, lawyers definitely equals money. And I guess another revenue stream, Atari warns users against third-party carts in Germany.
Atari's official fan club mag in Germany has warned users that they have received reports that some users' VCSs have stopped working after playing third-party carts, and warned that such use will nullify their warranties.
So not just clone carts, they're bricking people's systems.
Well, they're not bricking them. They're just saying, if you want to keep your warranty, don't go buying an Activision title.
Oh, I got it.
Yeah, because you have to remember that, Activision does end up paying Atari some stuff, but most of these third parties have no contractual relationship with Atari. They're not paying them anything.
Oh, got it. Okay, yeah, I misread third party as like straight up pirate cartridges, but that makes sense. Yeah.
No, yeah.
Yeah, the whole standardization of Atari carts leaves. That was one of the first things that I ran into actually looking at 2600 games, is just all the different types of cases for the carts and who makes them and all that fun stuff.
It was complete Wild West. There's no standardization, which also, of course, means that it's kind of believable that there might be shoddy carts that could potentially damage the hardware. But, and this is also one of the arguments for Nintendo's seal of quality. If you buy this product, it's not going to fry your system.
Right, exactly. But in this case, Atari's like, we're not dealing with it. You do your own thing.
Exactly.
As best they can. All right, going from third party to changing games. Modify your games with Answers PGP1.
Answer Software Corporation of Cupertino, California, has shown off their Personal Game Programmer 1 add-on for the VCS. This keypad-based system that plugs into the VCS will allow players to modify the graphics in existing games, as well as change elements of the game through the inputting of codes.
So, early Game Genie?
Bingo.
Got it.
Game Genie with a focus on the graphics, but remember the way that the VCS creates graphics is how many times am I going to repeat this missile graphic, this one pixel, and then in the next line, how many times am I going to do it the next line, how many am I going to do it the next line? So you could do this with basically peeks and pokes and these codes that you put in. The system is obviously not going to sell terribly well, not going to be around for terribly long, but it will come out, and it will hopefully inspire some people to learn more about computers or something.
Yeah, I was going to say, I love these type of hardware things that give people who want to, might necessarily know how to code specifically for hardware, but to get an idea of like what makes their games tick. And I could see maybe swapping out some sprites that maybe intentionally obscured into something that's more noticeable might help in certain situations.
Yeah, definitely. And also just be better artists than the programmer, because most of these games were done by one person.
That too.
All I have to say is be very scared of the giant duck in Adventure.
I was about to make... Yeah, don't touch the duck. Continuing on to VCS developments. Turn your VCS into a computer.
Entex, best known for their electronic games, has announced the Entex 2000 Piggyback, a VCS add-on that sports a Z80A chip, basic ROM, 3K of RAM, and a full keyboard to let players become programmers for just $125.
That's really cool. So this is taking that idea to the next level.
Yeah, and there had been some rumors that Atari was trying to do this much earlier, and I think there's even going to be another attempt to do this a little bit later. But yeah, it's, here's a keyboard and a little bit of extra RAM and stuff. Let's use this device, as an audio output to the TV, potentially something with the CPU, and it's an interesting little device. Now, they would later also announce an adapter for the Intellivision, so you could plug this thing into the Intellivision. I don't know if that ever actually shows up.
That's interesting. Do we know how this did?
Not great. There are devices out there, but I couldn't find any kind of sales numbers. I can't imagine it sold terribly well. But I can definitely see, the people who really wanted to learn about the system doing it. But since it has its own Z80A, I don't know how much interaction the keyboard is going to have with the internal 6502 chip. That is an excellent question I don't know the answer to. Because that was already the problem with the Intellivision computer add-on, that you really weren't touching the Intellivision hardware when you used it. You were just using the Intellivision as a video output device.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of like a sandbox experience. Hardware sandbox?
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, that's neat. Well, hey, it's making headlines here, so it's something.
There you go.
All right. Moving on to a separate... That was a terrible segue. I don't know where I was going with that.
You just wanted to throw it together. That's cool. I respect it.
All right. Well, moving on from a consoleized adapter to something a little more portable, Palmtex takes gaming on the go.
Palmtex's PVS, a palm-sized video game system, has been shown off at CES. The handheld system is a clamshell with each game having its own 32 by 14 low-resolution display with overlays, CPU, and memory. The system will ultimately only sell some 5,000 units and get 3 games, falling victim in part to the crash and very low-quality production.
So fair warning, this sparked our segue earlier and a rabbit hole into looking at these, because this reminded me of the later on release of the R-Zone.
Yes.
Overlays that fit on top of these. They were LEDs, right?
Yeah, LEDs in this case.
Yeah, for this thing, man, 32 by 14. It's I could see some promise out of this, but 3 games and 5,000 units, definitely not there.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you have a black and white overlay, it's very reminiscent of a Sinclair Spectrum screen, where you have the high resolution monochrome layer on the front, and behind it you have these, I think it's 8 by 8 blocks of color that, interacts with it in such a way that you could, in theory, get some colorful graphics out of it. But, it's just too little. It's probably too primitive. The few videos that are online look okay-ish, but they're not going to set the world on fire.
Yeah, neat opportunity, really bad timing. All right, enough of the portable space. Let's get back to computers.
Well, now that you're... sorry. Talking about portable...
Anything's portable if you try hard enough.
Well... and they tried with this one. Okay, let's take it away.
Byte gets hands-on with Compaq.
The first true PC-compatible gets a preview in Byte magazine. It's cheaper than the original, runs the system software, and it's portable.
So we couldn't fully escape portable saying.
No, we couldn't. There's a reason I had the Palmtex right in front of this, okay? So
it's like you planned this out. That's incredible.
Yeah, imagine that.
So this has to be, I haven't seen any pictures of this. I imagine you probably have. This is a briefcase system, is it not?
Well, it's what you would call a luggable. It's not the only one we're going to talk about today. There's more luggables on the way. But yeah, this is a luggable, and we'll put pictures in the show notes. Mm-hmm. It quite literally is just this giant, super heavy box that has a handle on the top. And when you pop it down, the screen is a CRT. It's not using an LCD screen.
Good, so it's big, okay, portable and heavy.
Yeah, so it is a monster. It is literally a monster. But it is the first true PC compatible. Now, we've talked about this a few times over the last year. There's been a ton of companies doing PC workalikes, which are systems that use similar or same hardware as the PC, will run a lot of the same stuff if you do the right things. But this is the first time that somebody has truly reverse engineered the BIOS.
Interesting.
So that PC-DOS, aka MS-DOS, will run on this thing. And this is the reason we have PC compatibles today. This is where it all gets started.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Compaq's obviously a known brand, so they did pretty well for themselves.
Oh, yeah. I mean, these guys are going to make a mint off of this. Now they're going to get that crap suit out of them. And Byte Magazine also sort of hints that this is probably going to happen, especially because IBM has been going after IBM engineers who have been either trying to sell the secrets of the PC or leaving the company to start their own PC manufacturers. I mean, everybody knows the compatibles are coming. It's just a question of, can IBM put the kibosh down on them before they can flourish?
Sure.
Yeah. But, Compaq's going to be the first one out of the gate that really, really does it. And after them, the floodgates will be open. And a really good version of this, have you seen the TV show *Halt and Catch Fire*?
Yes. Some of these stories ring really close to at least the first season of that show. It's real good.
Oh, yeah. And the later shows are the stuff of the 30-year jump. So, yeah, it literally is the Compaq story. It's not the Compaq story. They mixed and matched a bunch of different events from this era into these fictional characters. But basically the machine that they create there in the first season is the Compaq computer.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I hadn't drawn that parallel.
Yeah.
I figured it was, just whatever imaginary computer that they created. But yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah. And that's why it's also a portable and all this other stuff. And just to talk numbers here, the base Compaq will cost just under $3,000 according to the article, while an equivalent IBM would cost you $3,800. And the big advantage of the Compaq is because they're doing it as a portable, and because they are soldering in a whole bunch of the components, it's going to still have 3 open expansion slots. Whereas the IBM, the base version, is so low spec. I mean, this thing is going to be shipping, I believe it's 128K of memory.
Oh, wow.
Whereas the base IBM is shipping with only 64. And so by the time you've upgraded the IBM's memory to be equivalent to what Compaq is offering for just $3,000, you now have run out of slots. The IBM would only have 1 open slot versus the Compaq 3 open slots.
Got it.
And in the PC area, that's a huge deal. So I mean, they're just going to open this up so wide, and thank you IBM for creating this.
Right? That's exactly it.
But then again,
yeah,
IBM,
yeah. Well, let's move on the other side of the fence here. Apple unveils the Lisa.
Apple has unveiled its latest machine, the 16-bit GUI-driven, hard drive-enabled, mouse-included Lisa. The system is estimated to retail for about £8,000, and this is in British pounds. So this article is actually coming from a British weekly magazine. That's why it's not showing up in the American magazines yet. There'll be more details in the American mags in the coming month. So they're estimating £8,000 in England. That would be more than $12,000 at the time. The pound was much more powerful back then. Mm-hmm. But the U.S. debut price is going to be the very more reasonable $9,999.
Not bad.
It's a disaster.
For an Apple.
It's a disaster. Yeah, for an Apple. The Lisa's going to be an unmitigated disaster. The Macintosh, just, because some people get these mixed up, the Macintosh is not an evolution of the Lisa. They were both being developed at the same time in parallel. And so, the Lisa is going to go down in flames. The Mac is, for some reason, going to survive. Don't ask me why. But it is, though, for most people, and this is actually a big thing in the article, for most people, this is the first time they're seeing a mouse. It's not the first system to come with a mouse. Xerox has done this before, but it's going to be one of the first ones that people have seen with a mouse.
Yeah, the then modernization of having that GUI, too, is really early intro.
It's really early. It's not the first one again.
Right.
We just talked a month or two ago about how the guys who made VisiCalc have already shown off a demo of their GUI, but they're not going to make it to market in time. They're going to have some serious delays, and the company's going to start falling apart, blah, 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 blah. But they've already kind of shown off their GUI, and it's in the air. Everybody has seen what Xerox PARC has done. Everybody who's in this space is playing around with some variation of the GUI at this point. And there's going to be GUIs. I mean, Ken Williams is playing around with the idea of an Office package where instead of typing in commands to open up the different programs, you click on, you choose them from a graphic-based menu and stuff. Everybody is trying to move towards getting away from the text parser. It's just a matter of, who's going to get there first and who's just going to take off.
Yeah, really grabbing that mainstream.
Yeah.
Handholding. Running with
and, if you have 100 different manufacturers all making machines that run your MS-DOS, you're kind of in a good position. Just saying.
Right. But you're going to sue the hell out of them anyways.
Exactly.
Alright, well, going from the box to the very core, Intel introduces the 80286.
A major upgrade to the 8086 architecture, the 80286 may soon become the heart of the IBM PC, boosting speed of the machine sixfold but also doubling its cost.
What a boost.
Yeah. I mean, the 286 is obviously going to take a little while to catch on, but it really is going to become the chip that makes the PC the workhorse in offices. I mean, the 286 just gives you the power that you need to do all that. The 386 is going to be what propels the PC into the realm of gaming elite, but the 286 is what's going to really make it a usable system at home. It's going to make Windows really run properly, and so yeah, this is a major announcement. The weird thing is, it doesn't have its own article. It's literally one line in the middle of an article about what does the next version of IBM's PC look like.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so it's kind of weird because at this point, I mean, if you look at all the different computers on the market, there's not a lot of them using Intel chips. You've got the Motorola 68000 systems. A lot of people are developing systems built around that chip. You've got all the 8-bit stuff running either Z80s, the CPM systems. Most of them are running Z80 still. Got Moss's 6502 family, the Commodore 64, the VIC-20. Those are big machines. You've got, Apple betting on the Motorola as well. So, it's kind of like, well, Intel's got a new chip. Isn't that exciting?
For a single sentence. It took me a minute to respond, too, because I was like, is that it? That's kind of big.
Yeah, and if you look at the article, it's just one little line. I almost missed it entirely as I'm, going through page after page of stuff to see if there's something interesting. And I noticed the number 80286. I was like, wait a second, we haven't covered the 286 yet. And yeah, so it's, at the time, nobody thought it would be that big of a deal.
Yeah. Well, hey, Billy Businessman running spreadsheets is just rubbing his hands together waiting for this bad boy to come out.
Oh, hell yeah. It's going to make work so much easier.
Exactly. All right.
Speaking of things that'll make life easier.
There you go. 3.5-inch floppy, standard agreed on.
We reported last year that the 3.5-inch floppy format had been born, but multiple manufacturers had slight variations on their systems. Well, Sony has announced that an agreement has been reached with over a dozen companies, including Atari and Verbatim, to a unified standard for 3.5-inch floppy diskettes.
So, what has been the variations of 3.5 before?
It was the issue of density. as far as I can understand it, I mean, I'm not super technical, but Sony invents the format, basically the shape and everything else.
Okay.
And there's also a couple other formats, like there's 3-inch discs, which our European listeners will remember those well from the Amstrad CPC used those. Those were slightly different shape and everything else. But the battle here was how much information, how tightly packed should the information be? Now, Sony was pushing for a much denser format that would have put more data on the disk, but also would have required the equipment to be more expensive to manufacture. Mm-hmm. Because, the tighter you make the lines, the more precise the equipment has to be. And a lot of these other companies were like, no, let's go a little bit cheaper. That way we can make it more accessible, easier to build, and so forth. And Sony is actually going to still be pushing its higher density format. Even though this agreement has been made, they're still going to be trying to push their higher format, I believe, to IBM even. They're going to be trying to get IBM on board with their version. It's not going to work, but, it's kind of like, with beta video, and they're like, well, ours has better pictures. Like, yeah, but now I need 2 cassettes for one movie, and I can't put the super long play and record 12 hours on a cassette, and yeah, that kind of thing. So, we have now the 3.5-inch floppy. We've gone from 8-inch to 5.25, now to 3.5-inch. So, let the games begin. As in, let's pirate as much as we can.
That's one of the drivers for sure.
Oh, hell, you have no idea how many discs I bought back in the day. Oh, my Lord.
Yeah, I have a few boxes. That's definitely a thing.
The question is, how long are those boxes?
That's true.
Mine were truly long boxes. It was crazy. Oh, well. Speaking of diskette formats.
Yes. CP/M compatibility grows more difficult.
Commodore's C64 is the latest machine to tout CP/M compatibility through an add-on. But, according to Byte magazine, there is no indication of how the thousands of applications made for the operating system will ever run on Tramel's brown box, since there is no way to get an IBM-formatted 8-inch drive attached to a C64, and that is the format most CP/M software has been distributed on.
What is CP/M?
Okay. CP/M is an operating system created by I almost said Digital Illusions, but that's just because I've been doing the 30-year research already. This was created by Digital Research, Inc. This was a company started by Gary Kildall. If you've ever watched old episodes of the Computer Chronicles, that TV show that used to be on every week with news about the computer industry. If you haven't seen it, if you go to YouTube, you'll find a ton of I think it's almost the entire back catalog of the show.
Oh, wow.
And, yeah. And Gary Kildall was very frequently a co-host on there. Now, CP/M is an operating system that's running primarily on the Z80 machines of the time, which was really good because, the TRS-80 ran on CP/M, and you could very easily get it running on the original Intel 880, I believe, would also work. Now, they do a variation of it on the PC, and originally IBM approached Digital Research to get their operating system, and there's a story, I don't know how accurate it is, but I think it's probably very accurate that Kildall actually blew off IBM when they came to his office, to talk about this, because he had promised his wife to take her out flying or something. Or some trip or something, and apparently he wasn't a very good businessman, and so they needed an operating system, and that's when Microsoft comes in. And MS-DOS or QDOS, quick and dirty operating system, that is what they turned into MS-DOS, is very, very similar to CP/M in its functionality and how you interface with it and so forth.
Oh, neat. Okay.
The only problem is, if it's not CP/M, it won't work. So in those early days of computing, when you needed an operating system, especially because CP/M, and I've never used it myself, but CP/M was famous for the fact that it had really good disk controllers built into it.
Interesting. Okay.
Which wasn't, a given back in the day.
Mm-hmm. I have to admit that my familiarity begins at DOS, so this is interesting.
And CP/M is before that. That's like the universal operating system. The only problem is it won't run on a 6502.
Got it.
So this is one of the reasons why Commodore comes out with the 128, because it has a second processor, a Z80 in it, so it can run CP/M natively. Microsoft actually has been selling, at this point for about 2 years, a Z80 add-on card for the Apple II, so you can run CP/M on the Apple II, because Microsoft has been making a bunch of software that runs under CP/M.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's, as soon as you get away from the Z80 machine, CP/M becomes extremely difficult to run. Okay. And even though they're porting it to different systems, a lot of the software is not compatible.
Sure.
And so, it's basically, it's DOS, but without having a uniform platform. So as soon as you need to access graphic hardware, for example, forget it. There's no compatibility. As long as your programs are pure text, you might be able to work with it as long as you have the same number of columns on the screen, which is also not a given, etc., etc., etc. There's just so many of these, factors to get the compatibility down that are just, a little too random at this point. And so, CP/M is that. And since a lot of business software has been written for CP/M over the last however many years it's been since CP/M hit the market, and it's been quite a few, the initial release was 1974. We're talking a system that goes way back.
Yeah.
What it really means is that you have this investment in software that you may want to keep using, but Byte makes a good point here. It's like, if you wrote this stuff 5 years earlier on 8-inch discs, how are you going to get that even onto the new system?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. And literally that's the beauty of, the IBM PC compatible thing. I mean, I could take a modern PC and install DOS 1.0 on it, and it'll work. And if I buy a disk drive, I'll be able to plug it in. And so, this is where the hardware environment wasn't there yet for this to survive. It's hitting its breaking point, and now they've done the adaptation of it for the IBM PC, which costs more than MS-DOS, is an option when you buy the PC, but it's also not software compatible with all the stuff that you're bringing in, so it's kind of pointless, and it's very quickly becoming a non-issue. And unfortunately, Gary Kildall is going to face a very bad end. Alcoholism, depression, ultimately ends his life. It's just not pretty. I don't know if I can't remember if it's a suicide or if he just drinks himself to death. But it's kind of sad because he is a pioneer. He is one of the people who creates a lot of the standards for that MS-DOS takes over, and not as well remembered as he should be today. But
sure. You can't deny the early pioneers there. Well, we're recognizing him now.
Yeah.
And that's interesting, though. Yeah, because that's... Wow, all right, I learned something today. That's crazy.
Yeah, the last release of CPM, OG CPM, is going to be in 1983. There's going to be some attempts to bring it back later, but that last version is going to be coming out this year. The year that we're going back to.
Right. All right, well, let's move on to some more less depressing Commodore news. Also, we can't escape it. Commodore announces portable 64.
Commodore has announced that they will be making a portable version of the C64 with a 5-inch screen and built-in disk drive.
Now, how popular is this so late in the Commodore cycle?
Well, this is very early in the Commodore cycle. Remember, the C64 just came out in the back half of 82.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah, I've got my timeline shifted then.
Yeah, so the C64 is literally still a brand new machine. It hasn't actually overtaken the VIC-20 yet.
Oh.
So this is very early, but this, starting with the Osborne, which was also a portable, luggable computer. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where everybody feels that the office computer or the businessman's computer is going. And the C64, the base IBM ships with 64K. Why can't we have our 64K computer also, ship with this? And this is going to become the SX64. And it's a really nifty little computer. You could get it either with 1 or 2 disk drives built in, and full color monitor. And, it's basically just a C64. It does everything a C64 does. There's no additions. It's the front panel pops out. It's got a nice big handle. You could prop it up. It weighs a ton. Buddy of mine has one, and but yeah, fun little device, and not going to set the world on fire because there are not a lot of people going to be using C64s for business applications. But hey, it's going to be the luggable for the Commodore set.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm looking at a picture of it now. Yeah, the front panel has a keyboard that pops off.
Yeah.
On the top, and I like the little floppy storage, too. Oh, yeah, I guess this is an unfamiliar form factor for me, not having lived that era or done any research of that era. I guess that's what I think of when I think briefcase computers, too, of the time, where it was just, because the tube was so large, it's not opening up like a clamshell, you're literally just popping the top off of a big box and using that.
Exactly. Well, and the Compaq did the same exact thing. The Compaq is the same form factor, although the Compaq actually looks bigger, and the Compaq doesn't have a color screen. It's just a monochrome screen, which is another big one. But then again, the Compaq is more designed to use the internal screen when absolutely necessary. But if you're doing presentations and stuff, you would just plug it into a real monitor. And
absolutely, or some sort of display thing. Yeah, that's neat. Huh.
Yeah, no, it's a great concept for the time. Also, there's no battery in it, so it always has to be plugged into the wall.
Mildly portable. Got it.
Mildly portable. But yeah,
you're just carrying a car battery around with you the whole time in the other bag.
Exactly. Well, and that second bay was meant for a second disk drive if you had that.
Got it. Or floppy storage.
Or floppy storage. It's very good for floppy storage.
Yeah, that's what I saw there. It actually was labeled storage there, too. That's kind of cool. It's an interesting way of purposing. Well,
and you can carry, need to carry your floppies around. There's no hard drive in this thing.
Exactly.
So no floppies, you're not doing much. And, but yeah, fun stuff. You just see the size and how quickly they're expanding everything, which is pretty cool. But, oh well, Jack Tramiel isn't done with us yet.
No, he is not. Tramiel declares war on Sinclair.
Jack Tramiel has announced that Sinclair's $99 price point will not remain uncontested ground. fueling speculation that the 2K Commodore Max system will launch not at the original $179, but at $99.
That's not bad for $100.
Oh, yeah. Well, Sinclair's been at the $100 level since about 1980 now, with the ZX80. Now, granted, it's a machine that is so underpowered that every time you push the keys is kind of harsh because there's no actual keys. It's just a membrane. But every time that you activate one of the touch areas, the screen goes blank because it doesn't have enough memory to both process the screen and your keystroke at the same time.
That's beautiful.
Beautiful, yes. Now, that $99 price range, if he can break it with the Commodore Max, is huge because the Commodore Max is hardware is identical to the C64, except instead of 64K of RAM, it only has 2K of RAM. It's still going to have a keyboard, but a membrane keyboard similar to the ZX80. And the idea is that it's primarily going to be a video game system. So you're going to just load everything off a cartridge. That's why you don't need the extra RAM. But it's going to have the hardware sprites and the 16 colors and all that stuff that the C64 has.
Got it.
Yeah. Now, it's going to come out in limited numbers, I believe, in Japan. I don't think it actually gets a release in North America. Definitely doesn't get a release in Europe. Because by the time it comes out, I mean, this year, 1983, is going to see the price war with TI just go to extremes, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the next story as well already. And by the time this is supposed to come out, the Commodore 64 is hovering about $100, or a little. It's kind of come down in price so quickly from its initial $600 that there's really no room in the market for this machine anymore. Plus, also the entire market for video game consoles is going to die. So it's like, why are we doing this? No, get rid of that.
Yeah.
And and just to put it in perspective of where Commodore is, they've announced that VIC-20 production will rise from 2,000 units per day to 3,000 units per day. And the C64 production will rise to 10,000 per month.
That's a lot of units.
That's a lot of units. But I mean, the VIC-20 in the first year hit 1 million units sold.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it's the best-selling computer up until that point. I mean, the Apple II's been on the market since '78. And it hasn't reached 1 million. So
yeah, there's definitely a difference there.
It's a huge, huge difference. And the C64 is going to leave the VIC-20 in the dust very, very quickly, as far as sales numbers are concerned. So, by the end of 1983, the VIC-20 is basically going to be a memory, and the C64 will be on its way to owning the home computer market, at least in North America.
Passing on the torch a little bit there.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. All right.
Now let's go to the distinguished competition, as Stan Lee would always say.
Nice. I was looking for a better segue. It wasn't coming out. Texas Instruments targets ZX81 and TI-99/2.
No, not and. With.
With. Oh. All right. Let's do that again. You're right. Texas Instruments targets ZX81 with TI-99/2.
Yeah. Sorry, I had to throw all that crap in there just, to make it harder to read.
Yeah, you threw me off with the slash in the title.
The TI had dumb naming conventions. Okay. Not content with duking it out with Jack Trammell's Commodore, Texas Instruments has declared war on Sinclair as well by announcing the sub-$100 TI-99-2. A spec-down, black-and-white version of the TI-99-4 running on just 4K of RAM. The system was shown at CES, but would ultimately get canceled as the price war continued, and the TI 99-4A hit the $100 price point later in the year.
They are just
none of this makes any
more.
sense.
No.
Okay, so the TI 99-4 and 4A at this point was just a slightly remodeled version of the original.
Okay.
That is a 8-bit home computer, full color. It's using, I believe it's the same exact chip or very similar graphic chip to what was also in the MSX and the ColecoVision.
Okay.
So if you know what ColecoVision colors look like and sprite capabilities, basically that's what you've got in this machine. The slightly matted colors, but, you know, it can actually do quite a bit. Now, the problem is TI has gotten in way over their heads. They thought that they could own this with their vertical integration. Unfortunately, Jack Tramiel also has vertical integration because he owns a chip maker. And the big issue is they were betting on cartridges. Cartridges are going to be the format, and everybody's just going to buy TI-made cartridge software. And Jack Tramiel does not care whose software you buy as long as you buy his computer. And so, yeah, they came in way too pricey. They've had to drop the price so dramatically over the last 2 years that it's really, or last year, that it's no longer going to be tenable. And by the time they hit the $100 price mark, it's just, Jack is just going to be like, oh, really? You want to play that game, TI? And at the next CES, there's going to be some fallout, or the one after that. I can't remember if it's the next one or the January CES of '84.
Oh,
so
wow.
One of those two, but I believe it's probably the '84 one. And that's when Texas Instruments will finally throw in the towel. But we will see when we get to that point.
Right. This is currently developing war of attrition here.
Exactly. We've already seen the arcade market is in full-blown turmoil. The console market blew up in December. The home computer market is on its way there very, very quickly. But, you know, it's just a little bit behind. Plus, the characters are a lot more interesting in the computer market than in the console space. Yeah.
Well, let's move from the console space to the watch space. Timex to distribute Speccy in the USA.
We talked last month about how Timex had met their contractually agreed upon sales figures for the North American version of the ZX81 and have now gained exclusive distribution rights, forcing Sinclair to abandon their U.S. mail order operations. What wasn't clear was whether they would also gain exclusive distribution rights to the Spectrum through this contract. Apparently that has been cleared up too, and Timex will hopefully be launching Sinclair's latest in the first quarter of 1983.
So how long has Timex been in the computer business?
Well, Timex actually owns the factory where Sinclair has been making his computers in Ireland.
Okay.
Yeah. So Timex has actually been in this for a while. Sinclair controls the sale of the machines in England. But in the United States, he had 3 different operations going. He had a deal with American Express, was selling the machines. So they had this weird mail order thing where you could buy it through an American Express mail order system.
Oh, weird.
He had his own mail order system where he was selling them under the Sinclair name. And Timex was selling a modified version that actually had a better keyboard I think it had a slightly better keyboard and it had more memory than the UK version.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because it was a 1K system in the UK, so they were selling it with 2K, you know, that made all the difference. But, you know, Sinclair was known for, you know, bare bones.
Got it.
And that was kind of the appeal. You could actually buy it as a kit. That was the thing, is buy the whole computer and put it together yourself. Or you could pay a little bit more and get it assembled. So it's a very different world. Not that there weren't kit computers in the States. I know everybody, don't send me hate mail. I know there were kit computers in the States. Right. But that's not really the point here. And now the question was with the Sinclair Spectrum, his first color computer, and that's selling really, really well in England. The question is, who was going to get the distribution rights in the States for this? And they had worked out this deal between Timex and Sinclair that if Timex had sold a specific number of units in North America within a certain time frame, that they would then automatically get the exclusive rights to distribute the Sinclair systems. And so now they're going to get ready to launch the Sinclair Spectrum in North America. The only problem is that they're going to try to upgrade it the same way they upgraded the ZX81. And that's going to be the Timex 2068. That's going to launch in November of 83. They were hoping for first quarter. It's going to get delayed because they're making these upgrades to it. And the problem is that the improved graphics chip is going to make it incompatible with virtually every Spectrum title. So the very large software library that's being produced or amassing in the UK will not be importable on the US systems, and it's basically going to become a fracas.
Sure, yeah, that sounds like a very bad move.
Yeah.
This whole saga is just very bizarre to me.
Well, and it really is a wonderful sign of how the computer industry as we know it today, it wasn't certain that this is how it was going to evolve. Uh-huh. There was no way of knowing, well, what does it mean to buy a computer? Because if you go back to the very first systems in the mid-70s, it's a kit that you have to buy, you put it together yourself, purely for hobbyists, no real practical functionality, and then you get, the Trinity, the Apple II, the Trash 80, and so forth, and you start to get that, and those were all designed around, you're going to learn how to program BASIC and create the applications that you need. Then VisiCalc comes along, and suddenly it's like, well, you buy this computer because you want to have your spreadsheets for your company all stored on a disk. And you're buying it to play games, and you're buying it for existing software as opposed to making it yourself. And the moment you get that, we're buying it not to write our own software, it becomes a mass market product. But how are you going to sell that? Mail order was great for the hobbyists who, they were going to buy the hobbyist magazine, see the ad, and that's it. But now you're getting families buying it. You're getting small business people who don't know anything about computers buying it, and they need to walk into a store. And the hobbyist stores are too hard to find, too inaccessible. The mass market retailers are now coming, and so the idea of doing these mail order only products are for a mainstream audience are simply no longer going to be tenable. In England, Sinclair is now selling through a chain of newspaper stands, basically. It's, how do we get this in front of people so people who normally wouldn't even be thinking about it see it every day until they decide to buy one? And so this evolution of, who's got it, who's got the distribution channel. I mean, American Express selling a computer doesn't make any sense. But then again, American Express was a card for people who had money, and it gave the system a cachet of, ooh, you've got money. Would you like to have a computer in your home? Here, we'll give it to you super cheap, so it feels almost like an add-on to your credit card bill or something.
Right, exactly. But yeah, those benefits. I mean, I definitely, from a sales point, it makes sense. It's just a weird, as I said before, it's just a weird amalgamation of how it actually came to be.
Exactly, and that's kind of fun because we've been chronicling, the introduction of these systems. I mean, the shows now we're 4 years into the show. And I've been chronicling, Sinclair first starting up with computers. Sinclair trying to get into the States, the Timex thing, the Amex thing. It's just weird to see how long some of these relationships last, how fly-by-night some of this stuff is, and now with Commodore really breaking into everyday mass market retailers, the Kmarts of the world, the Fred Meyers of the world, and so forth. It's becoming a very different market. It's the attributes that make a computer successful are changing dramatically. And, and that's not over. Those changes are not over yet. And we will continue to chronicle them here on the show. Dear listeners, don't stop listening. Tune in next week or something. Okay, let's keep going.
Well, tune in this next article, too. Clive sells 10% stake in Sinclair Research.
Clive Sinclair has sold 10% of Sinclair Research in a stock flotation. The 400,000 shares have sold for £13.5 million, and all the shares sold were from Clive Sinclair's own 95% stake in the company. He will use the new funds to continue financing the development of his electric car project.
What becomes of that car project?
Oh, you're not familiar with Sir Clive Sinclair's amazing car. Well,
no,
we're still a few years away from this.
Okay.
This is the C5. And
so is he just the Carmack of computing world? Like the hardware world?
Well, he's a tinkerer. Again, you really need to watch the TV movie Micromen, which is the rise and in some ways fall of Sinclair, and the rise and somewhat fall of Acorn, the makers of the BBC Micro.
Okay.
So yeah, it chronicles their parallels because basically Acorn is started by people who worked at Sinclair first.
Got it.
And the C5 was, or better said, the feeling I get from all this is Sinclair doesn't really care about computers. He never really cares about computers.
Yeah.
That's never the thing he wants to do. He's doing digital watches and all this other stuff beforehand. Computers were just another interesting product, but it wasn't a technology he really cared all that much about, but it allowed him to continue financing other things. And he makes the Sinclair C5, which is, it's hard to say here. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. I just sent you a link to it.
Okay.
You can click on it, and it's just a dumb idea. It's a dumb idea put together by a guy who is so enamored with the ability to do something, to use the Jurassic Park meme, they were so busy figuring out if they could do it, he didn't ask if he should. So it's England, where not known for rain at all, builds a car with no cover, only 3 wheels, and is so low to the ground that if you're going to drive this on a road, no truck can see you. All the exhaust fumes of the cars in front and behind you, and this is a time when virtually everything is diesel still, is going right in your face. And it's just a freaking nightmare. It's bad. It's really, really bad.
Yeah, that's a heck of a rabbit hole. But I think you've been to, man, we've just been swapping rabbit holes since we started recording this.
Now, and the funny thing is, I mean, if you're a European computer gamer, the C5 is legend. It didn't matter if you were a Sinclair person or not. This was like in all the magazines. Everybody knew what the C5 was. It was just, a given that you had heard the horror story of the C5. Because Sinclair is going to blow a ton of his personal fortune on the C5. And the Spectrum is what is going to finance this thing. And he says, in the article that I'm quoting from here, he says that the reason why Sinclair Research, the company making the Spectrum, is not financing the C5 is because the long-term prospects of the C5 just don't match up with what Sinclair is doing with computers. The reality probably is more like, if he had done this, it would have created a massive financial problem for Sinclair Research.
Interesting.
And so he has to finance it largely out of his own pocket, which, just means that he's going to be stuck for cash at some point. And yeah, he's going to run into some serious financial trouble. He's not going to become poor by any means, but this is going to take a toll on his fortunes.
Got it. Yeah, more questions than usual about where money's coming from.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't think any bank would have ever bankrolled this. Ever. And he's not Sir Clive yet at this point. But still, they're not going to bankroll this. Anybody who looks at it and thinks about it for 5 minutes immediately realizes this is not going to work on a street. But, Clive is not going to figure that one out, unfortunately.
Oof.
Okay,
well, hey, never give up on your dreams.
No. And speaking of things that shouldn't be, this should be, but okay. Now, I have no segue. Just go on.
You're good.
Go on.
Competition Pro joystick debuts.
The joystick that became synonymous with 8 and 16-bit home computers on the continent, the Competition Pro debuts in the UK. Compatible with the Kempston joystick adapter for the Sinclair machines, it will go on to become one of the most beloved controllers of all time. And again, you're probably like, what the hell is a Competition Pro?
Yeah, I'm a little lost on these last couple ones.
Okay, yeah. And the Competition Pro, you've probably seen some variation of this.
Okay.
It's a small joystick shaped similarly to what you would have seen on an arcade stick back in the day, with 2 buttons in the front. It's a micro switch joystick, so that was its big selling point. That, it had a nice little click when you were playing it.
Oh, this thing.
Yeah, this thing.
Got it.
Yeah, the Commodore 64, the C64 Mini, and the C64 Maxi, the recreations of the Commodore 64, both shipped with these. There was even a version of this that was that you plugged directly into a TV set that had a bunch of C64 games in it. It's one of those very, very iconic joysticks. I never really felt that it was comfortable in my hand. I always thought it was a bit of a pain in the butt. But it's the normal configuration is a 9-pin, so it'll work on your C64, your Amiga, your Genesis, whatever. But both of the buttons are the same button, so it's not like it's a 2-button joystick. It's literally a 1-button joystick with both buttons doing the same thing.
Interesting.
Yeah. So if you're left-handed or right-handed, yeah.
Oh, got it. Yeah, that works.
Yeah. And that was a very common configuration for joysticks of the time. So the micro switching is absolutely awesome. The shape of the joystick, in my opinion, could have been better. I like the bigger quick shot joysticks like the Warrior was my cup of tea. But, to each their own. I knew a lot of people who had these.
Neat. Yeah, I think I got one. Yeah, because the Atari that I played for the 7 Minutes in Heaven, when that was gifted to me, I think it had one of these in.
Oh, really?
In that lot, yeah. So I've definitely seen the controller. I just didn't know that's what it was called.
Yeah. The Competition Pro, it comes in different colors too, but the classic is the black with the red buttons.
Yeah, that's the one I know I'd seen it. It's just that. Of course, joysticks having the craziest names, so they can get them off the shelves.
Exactly. And this one persevered. This name was just there all the way through its production run. But let's move away from computer hardware to computer software.
Yes. On hardware, Rockland moves into cartridges.
In a growing trend, third-party game publisher Rockland, which has released games like Gorf and Wizard of War on the Atari 8-bits, will be reissuing their disc games as carts for Atari computers because they are perceived as more consumer-friendly.
Which came first, the floppy or the cartridge?
Well, I mean, the Atari 8-bit system and the VIC-20, the Commodore 64, and so forth, all have cartridge slots.
Right.
You can use them for software or for add-ons. Now, so the cartridge slot is there. Now, the disc-based software before that, cassette-based software was usually what came first, just because if you were somebody making games, and these were usually kids, making games at home, you needed to store it on something, and you couldn't burn ROM chips to make a cartridge.
Right.
Now, the commercial games, especially in the early days, was almost an oxymoron. But, putting it on cartridge after everybody has already moved to disc doesn't make a lot of sense, except for the fact that we just came off of the biggest boom year for game consoles, and these computer game makers are like, hey, wait, we're missing a beat here. If we put it on cartridge, people might think it's just like a game console, and this will be a great idea. Let's put games on cartridge. This is going to become the downfall of a lot of computer game companies that are going to get stuck in with a ton of very expensive cartridges, because the cartridges cost real money to manufacture, whereas, discs, who cares? If you get returns, you can still reuse the disc, put a new label on it, and sell it with the next game.
Right.
This is going to be what almost kills Sierra Online, is almost going to die because they're going to start releasing games on cartridge that aren't going to sell. They are going to get saved by a contract from IBM to make a game for the IBM PC Junior, King's Quest. Without that game, they would have had to fold. And Rockland is, as far as I can see from the news, is just the first one to jump on that, or at least the first one being reported on.
Got it. Yeah, that's yeah, it's interesting the interpretation of writing on the wall and how it actually pans out. Yeah.
Oh yeah. These guys.
I mean, so how early did the crash start getting recognized for people making these moves? Because you mentioned this year is kind of the first year where it's like actually starting to.
Well, okay. A lot of this stuff is coming out at CES.
Okay.
And so you have to remember, and this is always the weirdness with the format of this show. This is why I always warn everybody, everything that we're talking about is in a publication dated in January. That doesn't mean that that's when the news is happening. Mm-hmm. So a lot of these are announcements at CES. These announcements were prepared way before Atari collapsed. Or Atari, and Atari hasn't collapsed yet, but Atari announced the less than spectacular earnings, the adjusted earnings expectations. It's before all the stores have started, reporting their Christmas sales. It's happening before people are starting to really realize. I mean, I can actually, and this is a little bit speculation on my part, but at this CES is the first time where a lot of the retailers are meeting one another and comparing notes. So as they're walking around this showroom floor where they're looking at all these wares and these thousands of companies trying to sell them product, they're bumping into one another, and they're probably for the first time slowly starting to realize it wasn't just my company that overpurchased. And so as all these companies are making these big announcements, there's the real effects or how this is going to pan out aren't really going to be felt for a couple more months. But they're making these pie in the sky decisions at this point.
Yeah, I'm just trying to put my head into like where these decision makers are right now. in the timeline. Yeah, and you're absolutely right with it. And we didn't have the internet like we do now, where like we can see data like in real time, and this is like, cool.
If you're waiting for the trade. If you're waiting for the trade publication, it's going to be a while. Now, if you're reading the newspaper, if you're reading the New York Times, you see this. But let's face it, if you're a retailer maybe someplace in the Midwest, you're not reading the New York Times. You're not getting the day-by-day breakdown of what's happening on Wall Street like we covered last month, where we did that all the stories in the New York Times that covered on this. You're waiting a couple months for the trade magazine maybe to come in and tell you what's happening.
Got it.
And that's going to be delayed. Now, there's another factor here. We just talked about the VIC-20 sold 1 million units. The Apple II has been selling like hotcakes. The Commodore 64 is the up-and-coming machine, blah, 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 blah. Mattel just announced the Aquarius and all these other machines. There's going to be dozens of computers on the market. Everybody's thinking, okay, even if consoles are dead now, and that's another bit of logic that's sort of seeping into some of the news articles this month. Yeah, consoles may be over, but that's why we've got computers. I also saw the first ad this month with Coleco trying to sell the ColecoVision, not just as the coolest game system, but there's going to be module add-ons. And one of them is going to turn it into a computer, which will become the Coleco Atom. Everybody thinks still, when we just talked about how Intellivision is finally going to have the keyboard add-on for the Intellivision 2. Mm-hmm. The idea of the computer as the next step from the console hasn't died yet. And a lot of people are starting to think, well, maybe we need to move from making console software to computer software because there's going to be even more computers than there are consoles in the homes. Everybody's going to want to have a computer, and it's going to sell even better. The only problem is, on a console, you couldn't pirate the software. And, once you figure out that cartridge game can be dumped into the memory of the computer and then just put on a floppy disk, you're only going to have one person buy a copy of the cartridge, and everybody else is just going to spread copies around. And that is something that these guys haven't figured out yet. They haven't figured out that the sales numbers of software on home computers look nothing like the sales numbers on console software. And that and again, we're jumping way ahead, but Activision is going to get hit by this when they finally start transitioning over to computers, and suddenly, their games are not selling in the same numbers. iMagic is going to run into this problem. All these companies that started out on console are not going to be able to survive with the same business models on home computers because there just isn't that much money to be made on home computer games because of the piracy question.
And we're way far ahead of the 1992 release of the "Don't Copy That Floppy" movement.
Oh, we've already talked about this. There was already a proposal by, I believe, Penguin Software to have a penguin symbol, and they were asking people to create it. That was going to be the anti-piracy symbol.
Oh, wow.
And the anti-piracy thing has already been going for years now in arcades. So the arcade board, that's why the recognition of trademark, of copyright for games in Japan was such a big deal this month. Mm-hmm. Because in Japan, it's just been a frenzy, a free-for-all. And just a few months before this, English courts finally recognized copyright. Because last year there was one of the big trade shows, one company even put up these big posters, explaining there is no copyright on video games. It is not illegal for us to sell a copy of Frogger right now because there's no copyright on video games here. Yep. And so, the software piracy thing has already been going for a while. This is already years and years after Bill Gates wrote his open letter to the hobbyists saying, "Stop copying my software." So it's this is still a deal, but there's a solution for piracy.
There is. Cosme brings budget software to home micros.
Cosme Incorporated plans to release computer games for the budget-conscious, with disc games going for between $15 and $18 and cassette titles for just $10. Their initial lineup includes a plethora of games for the Atari 8-bit, as well as 2 C64 classics, Aztec Challenge and Slinky.
So the early bargain bin?
Basically, they've seen that, hey, why let's go for the low budget. Let's, start making games that cost a little bit less. But, if we can make it up in quantity, all the better. And Cosme is going to be a fairly important company for quite a while. They're not only going to do budget titles. Games like The President is Missing is going to be a pretty deluxe package. That even includes an audio cassette with hints and clues and stuff. But so they're going to be a fairly important company for quite a while, and but they're starting out as a budget supplier, and this is going to then spread in Europe. For example, England's going to be jack full of budget suppliers, Mastertronic and Codemasters, very popular company still to this day, start out as these super low budget labels for cheap games.
Yeah, I was looking up Cosme Corporation because I hadn't really heard that before. They apparently were established. We're in 83, so 82.
Yeah, so they probably founded in 82. They're making their announcement here at CES. So,
that would make sense.
Yeah, so CES is in January, so it's one of those things where it's, you've got to have it all set up beforehand. They also make Super Huey. That's a very, very popular flight sim, combat flight sim at the time. I'm trying to remember. There's a bunch of games Cosme comes out with. And Forbidden Forest, Beyond the Forbidden Forest and Forbidden Forest. Yeah, how could I forget that? Well, when we get to Forbidden Forest, that'll definitely have to be a 7 Minutes in Heaven, because that's just too classic to ignore. But okay.
Yeah, that'll be to make up for.
Oh yeah. If you want to have a contender for first survival horror game, that kind of fits the bill. But yeah, that's enough. That's enough hinting at that.
Yeah,
so
that's fair. Well, from one survival to the other, survival software pioneers the demo disc.
Wow, I didn't even plan that transition, but that was nice.
I thought you were giving me a setup.
No, I didn't even think about it.
Awesome.
What may be the first case of a demo disc for a game going out to the public has been announced by Survival Software. For $5, refundable upon purchasing the whole game, players will get a trial version of their new Atari 8-bit computer game, Cyborg Zombies from Death Planet Kiev. Or Q.
Yeah, that looks like Q.
Yeah, Kyew. So
it's a very sci-fi name. I see what
very sci-fi name. Yeah. But so I have no idea what this game was. There's no apparent hint of this outside of this article. The article had a P.O. box number that you could send your $5 to. So I have no idea if anybody actually ever got a demo of this. I don't know if anybody ever bought the full-blown game. It's a complete mystery. But the idea of selling a limited version of this to the general public, and I mean showing off demo or pre-alpha versions of games at trade shows is already not an uncommon thing. But, selling a limited version of the game and then saying you could buy the rest of the game later, it almost feels like a proto-shareware model.
Yeah, no, I like the sound of that. That's neat that, you're putting your $5 down and I guess it's the equivalent of like a rebate or a coupon if you get the full version, which is interesting.
Yeah. Well, and you also have to remember, floppy disks at this point are not that cheap. You're probably paying $1 something just for the floppy disk. So then you have to add shipping and stuff to it. So the $5, you're getting a limited version. I mean, you're covering a lot of expenses there in that $5. But
yeah, I'm just trying to wrap my brain around that kind of distribution model at this time. That's really cool, though. Good on them for trying.
Oh, definitely. I was like, when I saw this, I was like, wow. I mean, later on, the main way of getting these demos out on the 8-bit systems are going to be the cassette tapes that are attached to magazines, especially in Europe. In the States, I don't think that ever really catches on as much. But in Europe, this becomes a major thing where, you buy the magazine and there's a cassette attached to it or a floppy disk that's going to have your demos on there.
Right.
But this was very, very forward thinking.
Yeah, I like it. I'll have to check out Death Planet Q at some point too.
There's no reference to it anywhere on the internet.
Wow.
As far as I can tell, it doesn't exist. And I want to find it. If anybody does see it, and I mean, I'm not saying I am the best person in the world for finding stuff on the internet, because as Ethan already showed, I couldn't find a mystery disc, but apparently somebody had it out there already on YouTube. So yeah, if somebody does know where to find this, please send me a link. I'd love to see it. Okay, and we're not quite done yet with interesting firsts, I guess.
Yeah, GameStar advertises Star Bowl.
GameStar has begun advertising their first football game, Star Ball, for the Atari 8-bits. This will mark the first football game by GameStar, co-developed by Scott Orr, who would later redefine football games with the Sega Genesis and Amiga versions of John Madden Football.
We saw John Madden's name come up earlier.
Yeah, John Madden at this point has licensed his name to CBS for a game ostensibly, I'm guessing for the VCS, never comes out.
That's what it was.
Yeah, and the original John Madden Football from EA is on the Apple II and has really nothing to do with the console versions that come later. But Scott Orr, he's the, I believe, co-founder of GameStar. And he's going to make a name for himself as a programmer or designer, at least extraordinaire, of computer sports games. They're going to do a ton of sports games at GameStar. And we reported on this a few years ago how he left GameStar at one point and then started a independent development studio. He did a game called ABC Monday Night Football. Don't quote me on which company. I want to say it wasn't Konami. It was Data East, maybe, I can't remember. But that's a game for the Commodore 64, DOS, Amiga, that already had that TV presentation on top of a football game. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. And he's going to go from that game to making Madden for the Genesis and the Amiga. And it's basically the same game on both systems.
Oh, neat. I'm liking the presentation of this, of Star Bowl. It's very effective.
Yeah.
Little they had to work with.
Exactly. I mean, he is working here with 1979 technology, 78, 79 technology. So right. It is an impressive looking game. Obviously, it's no patch on a modern football game, but I thought it was worth at least acknowledging that, this is where that legacy is going to start.
Very cool. Moving on, Epix gets cash infusion.
Automated Simulations, better known at this point under its Epix brand, has just gotten a $1.7 million cash infusion through $1 million in venture capital and the rest through a bank loan.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, and this is again this moment where now the venture capitalists are coming and knocking on doors. And we talked about this already last year at some point. The question is, where are they going to make money? And when I talked to Michael Katz, who isn't at Epix yet, but he will be brought into Epix because the venture capitalists are going to want a return on their investment, and the original co-founder of the company who's currently running it, as Michael Katz put it, was a bit of a geek. Didn't really want to get away from the complex strategy role-playing type games that had originally established the company. And that's when they're going to bring in Mike Katz, and then they're going to start doing things like Pit Stop and Summer Games and G.I. Joe and Impossible Mission, all the games that are really what people remember Epix for today. He's going to be the guy who comes in and turns the ship around and redefines the type of software that they're going to be releasing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's coming off of Temple of Apshai. That's the only one that I recognize from some of their back catalog. Yeah,
Temple of Apshai was, and you have to remember, Temple of Apshai is the start of that.
Yeah.
And that game engine, a lot of those games were actually just new mission disks, if you will, to run in the game engine. So a lot of them you actually needed Temple of Apshai to have, and then you would, import your character from Temple of Apshai and then keep playing the game from there.
Got it. That's a pretty cool platform. I see they released Jumpman this year as well.
Yeah, as soon as I get a review of Jumpman, that is totally landing on the 7 minutes list because Jumpman is awesome. Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're good. I could gush over this list. It's funny how, it definitely switches from nerdy to summer games.
Exactly.
Summer games too.
Yeah.
World Karate Championship. Wow. Yeah, there's some good ones in here.
Oh, tremendous lineup. I mean, Epix is the spirit of the C64 from let's say 83 through 86, 87. That's like
California games in 87.
Yeah. And I mean, they keep going after that with world games and stuff, but Epix begins to lose its way because they don't shift to more powerful platforms early enough. They kind of miss the boat there. And they also don't really get onto console fast enough.
Interesting.
That's going to bite them. So Epix falls by the wayside and they become almost irrelevant. They also try to do hardware. They're the ones who developed the Lynx. The Atari Lynx is actually developed by Epix. And that's a whole mess too. So
I was just jogging my memory because Epix is very familiar to me.
Yeah. I mean, Epix. Pit Stop too. It's still one of the best split screen racing games of all time. I mean, I would. Putting it up against Mario Kart is tough, but the strategic element of when to pull into the pit stop to change the tires and stuff is so deep and so cool that, it's an awesome game. Again, we need to play that multiplayer at some point.
Ooh. Yeah, we'll keep building our list, man. That's definitely happening.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yep. But we're not done yet. Now we need to go across the pond.
We do. Bug Bite defectors dare to imagine.
UK software house Bug Bite's top programmer and two of its top managers have left the company to form Imagine. The new company's first title, Arcadia, gets a full-page ad in Computer and Video Games magazine. The company very humbly claims that they were, quote, brought into being by top professional programmers, graphic designers, and software marketing specialists, unquote. And Arcadia is, quote, the game especially created to be the fastest, meanest, most addictive shoot-'em-up game you've ever desired, end quote.
I know nothing about any of that.
Okay, Bug Bite is a company. It's one of the very early companies to actually make a name for themselves with ZX80, ZX81 software and so forth.
Okay.
They even got mentioned a couple months before this by Margaret Thatcher in her address to a computer trade show. So Bug Bite is like, one of the few outstanding companies that actually could be considered a company at this point in England doing gaming software. And so
Maniac
these guys,
Miner this year.
Maniac Miner is...
Or Manic Miner, I'm sorry.
Manic Miner is coming, yes. Miner 2049er was on our list of 7 Minutes in Heaven games. So Manic Miner is going to be inspired by Manic Miner. By Miner 2049er. So, yeah, there's a lot of influences, but, the idea of the platformer as we know it today, starting really with Donkey Kong, but that also has its own influences, blah, blah, blah. Everything is influenced by something. Right. But Donkey Kong sort of starts that, little man running up and down ladders and across platforms and stuff, and jumping is in the air. And variations on that are going to abound. Now, Imagine is going to be famous or infamous for its excess. They're going to be id Software before id Software. The image of the ace teenage programmer who's driving a sports car is going to be what Imagine is selling. And famously, they will also completely implode financially on camera as a camera crew is doing a documentary about them as the court-appointed trustees for the bankruptcy court show up at their door and lock everything up. It's not bankruptcy court. It's just court-ordered people are coming in because they can't pay their debts. And the cameras are rolling the whole time. It's quite entertaining.
Wow.
And, and they will then, those people will break off and start Psygnosis, so we're going to end up getting Wipeout and stuff because of these guys.
Oh, neat.
So yeah, Imagine is going to be trying to push a lot of stuff. This game Arcadia, I've never played it myself. I did put some links to the video of it, and yeah, if you have an epileptic, even the tendency, there might be a 1 in 1,000 chance you'll get epilepsy. Please don't click on those videos, because it will trigger something. It's really bad. You may want to look at it. I do want to see your reaction to it, John, because it's kind of insane. Get your idea of what UK Spectrum software looks at this point in time.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
I think it's the first YouTube link here. 1 second. Going to edit this down a little bit.
I got to move over.
Oh yeah, here it is. Oh no, that's the VIC-20 version. That's the VIC-20 version, which is already not as bad as here. Let me see.
This is labeled as the best CX Spectrum game.
It's not the best one, but no, not by a long shot. Oh my god.
Oh man, that. Oh wow. That's a game right there.
If you want to call it that, sure.
These sound effects are something else. I don't know. They're like grindy, but also like nails against a chalkboard almost. This is incredible.
That's the ZX beeper. Now you also have to remember the ZX. Spectrum has a built-in speaker that you can't control the volume on.
Oh, I got it.
Yeah. So it's not coming through the TV at this point. It's literally this little speaker that you can't shut up.
That's so funny. It's like an awful Geiger counter. Wow. Man, this thing is chugging, too, with all the stuff they have on screen.
Oh yeah, and the flickering colors of the ship, where it's green and red and green, is just, I mean...
Yeah, you can tell it's related to what's on that line at the time. That's weird. I guess it changes when you're moving forward, too, to illustrate your, I guess your exhaust. That's wild.
Yeah, and the other thing is, it's a ZX Spectrum, so that also means there's no sprite hardware.
Right.
So they're having to do this in bitmap on a 16K system.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's so messed up on.
I laugh now, but they're doing the best they could with what they had. Although I have seen better games.
Oh,
it is crafted to be the fastest, meanest, most addictive shoot 'em up you've ever desired. I don't know what these people are desiring.
They're clearly appealing to masochists. That's all there is to it. There's no way any sane human being has actually desired this. But yeah, so links to all that in the show notes, everybody. So let's move on because there's so much still left to do.
Absolutely. In other Bug Bite news, Bug Bite ditches mail order.
Bug Bite has decided to phase out its mail order operations and only sell through retail outlets. They are the first major UK publisher to do so, in a sign of the maturing of the industry.
I could walk to the store, get Arcadia, and walk home with it.
No, actually, Arcadia is at this point not in stores yet. You have to order that one by mail order.
Ah.
Yeah, see, this is the
transition.
thing. This is the thing. If you're going to be doing it in stores, it means you also have to be able to manufacture enough units to actually send to stores.
Ah, okay.
Which requires a certain amount of outlay. If you're doing mail order, you have a little bit of leeway of being like, I'll only produce a very limited amount. If it becomes super successful, I can always print more, and I've already got people's money. But if I'm going to ship out to the stores and still have a return policy, perhaps, that requires a much larger initial outlay.
Right.
So you have to get to a certain size in order to be able to ditch the mail order concept. And now that these larger W.S. Smith or W.H. Smith, that's that nationwide newspapers retailer in a newspaper and magazine retailer in England, is selling computers and software. Now you suddenly have this built-in network where you can actually sell the software and reach a significant number of people. So, yeah. They're basically doing what Kmart is doing for the VIC-20 in the States.
Interesting. Yeah, I keep forgetting this is overseas.
Yeah, this is in England, so it looks a little bit different. I mean, store outlays are different. The idea of a giant Kmart-like store, they've got Woolworths and stuff, which is also going to become a major retailer for games. But, it's not like the States where you have a larger number of these larger department store type of stores that are really spread out throughout the suburbs and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, in other changing traditions, creative computing drops out of the software game.
Creative Computing, which together with other early pioneering publishers of computer trade magazines, has bowed out of the software distribution and publishing business. According to the magazine, the increased number of magazines it publishes, including one dedicated to games, as well as books, has made the software distribution side of the business simply one prong too many. Now, are you familiar with Creative Computing magazine?
Oh, okay. I was sitting there just stuck trying to remember where that name sounded familiar.
Yeah, Creative Computing magazine is like the OG computer magazine.
Right.
And the original editor of the magazine also published a book, I think it was called 100 Computer Games, which was just, type-in listings. That was actually pre-home computers. So it was actually something you could type in if you had access to a terminal someplace.
Oh, got it.
Yeah. And this is where, games like the original Star Trek, a mainframe game, gets wide distribution through this book. And so this always was one of these weird things where, you don't have a lot of hobbyist stores, you don't have all this, so a lot of these magazines had their own software distribution business alongside the magazine. And now that you've got the mainstream stores selling stuff, you've got Computerland with hundreds of stores and so forth, it doesn't really make sense for these guys to be in that business as well. And so they're just dropping out of it.
Yeah, just certainly, the signal of things changing.
Yeah. Also, it makes it easier for, retail outlets, big chains, to advertise in the magazine if you're not competing with them.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah. Huh. So it is interesting. Like I said, the maturing of the industry is happening now in a very important way.
Yeah. And actually, this next headline supports that. Independent computer stores are closing.
The rise of franchise stores like Computerland and Radio Shack, as well as the spread of computers and mass merchandisers, has made it hard going for mom-and-pop computer stores who see their margins on hardware dwindling in the hyper-competitive price wars.
You hate to see it, but that is the effect of, the things maturing.
Oh yeah. I mean, and one thing that's getting lost in this is the fact that, these guys, these little mom and pop shops, and I remember a lot of them from back in the day, and as an Amiga user in the United States in 1994 and 95, that was your only option, was the mom and pop shops. Mm-hmm. You really got, a very different level of customer care. You actually knew the people working in the store, and you would talk to them about latest developments and share gossip and all this other stuff. It was really a place for community. But, there's just no way that these guys can compete with the prices and especially the big discounts that the larger retailers can get on things like hardware.
Yeah, buying in volume and everything.
Exactly.
And I guess probably exclusivity deals in there as well.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Part of those agreements.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see this in some places, especially Europe will do this, where certain retailers will get like specific bundles, buy this computer with these software packages as one bundle will become, exclusive to certain chains and stuff. And, that's what's already happening here. I mean, it's very early for this, but it's already happening.
Yeah.
But not all is well in retail land.
Returns loom as threat to software industry.
Software Merchandising Magazine has an amazing article this month about the looming threat return policies may pose to the software industry. At this point in time, as this article was clearly written and researched well before Atari's December announcement, there are no standard return policies, if any, established by publishers of games to accept product that distributors or retailers would want to return. The article does discuss that some distributors have stock balancing and or return policies for their retailers, but the extent of these policies is not known, nor their effect on publishers should returns ramp up foreseeably. The record industry, which had its own massive problem with returns after overproduction and overhyping the popularity of songs, is seen as a possible path for the way software could go if the problems of overproduction are not dealt with. iMagic says they have been adjusting production from day one to not exceed demand, as there's now way more product than the market can absorb, and, according to them, most publishers haven't adjusted to the new realities of the last 12 months that saw a boom in software availability. Atari, on the other hand, doesn't see any problem because, and this is almost a direct quote, carts are more expensive than a record, so the higher inventory costs will make the inventory more valuable. Atari also claims that because modern retailers know what's going on in and out constantly and the market is less seasonal, there won't be the need to worry about the inventory ordered in September selling in November or December. And yes, the Atari quotes make no damn sense and are just words jumbled together.
Yeah, nothing to worry about. Nothing at all.
No, nothing. No. Well, okay, so I know this was a lot of text here, but this article is amazing. A link to the archive.org version is in the show notes. I do recommend everybody go and read through it because, yeah, it encapsulates a lot of the stuff that we talked about in our Crash episodes. If you haven't checked those out, please go back and check those out. Because what's happened here is the publishers, what they're calling manufacturers in this case, but the publishers of software don't have return policies. But the distributors do. So when the retailers and one of the distributors in the article says, the biggest danger is an overzealous buyer at a retail outlet ordering way too much product, then wanting to return that product to the distributor. And, the distributor said they already have a ton of cartridges just piling up in the warehouse and they don't know what to do with it. And so this is what is going to cause the crash. This is going to be the reason why publishers can't get rid of their new games. Nobody's going to buy their new games because the warehouses are full and the distributors need to get rid of their old product before they can start buying new product to resell to the retailers. And it's just going to be a shit show.
To the landfill.
To the landfill, yes. Now, one of the big things here is to remember is that Atari isn't going through distributors for all of its stuff. They are negotiating directly with some of the mass market retailers directly for their product. So they will suddenly start doing stock balancing or even return policies because they have these direct relationships and they're not going through a distributor.
Right.
The smaller companies are all going through distributors, so, they basically don't have to take the stuff back. The distributor gets stuck with it.
Yeah, that's definitely the beginning of the writing on the wall for sure.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be a shit show.
I think we're finally done with cartridges and home consoles. Well, that's a lie. Console tech comes to phones.
The Genesis, a new phone produced by the recently created American Bell Company, will feature interchangeable cartridges that can store varying types of data, such as phone numbers, birthdays, etc. The $350 device is one of the first new phones that consumers will be able to buy as opposed to lease from the phone company, which was the norm in the U.S. prior to the breakup of the phone monopoly.
Yeah, I get it. This is kind of the early... I mean, we're so used to phones having, contacts and everything in them. To have this kind of a thing...
Well, yeah. I mean, you had some of that already with professional office phones, but up until the point when AT&T gets broken up because of its monopoly, you could buy a third-party phone, but you also got a phone as part of the phone line.
Oh, interesting.
So this is why, the classic giant, super heavy-duty black rotary phone was just something that you got automatically from the phone company. That was included in there. So even though there might have been better phones, there was really no reason to buy another phone because you already had a phone. And now the Baby Bells are going to start offering this, and they're not going to be giving you that phone with the line. You're going to have to be buying your own phone, and this is why suddenly phones just look completely different for everybody.
Interesting. Yeah, I was looking up the tech on this phone. I'd still in my mind that it was like a video game console. That's not right.
No, it's not that Genesis.
Right. Outside of playing tunes with the number buttons. Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty solid... Yeah, it's neat to see some of that tech come to the house as opposed to...
Exactly.
Being on a desk.
Well, and the whole idea of, sticking in a cartridge, that's, something that comes directly from the video game, from the Fairchild Channel F. So it is kind of cool to see. Obviously, $350 for a phone is insane. But, and I don't know how practical it is to have to switch cartridges when I want to find out somebody's birthday as opposed to their phone number or whatnot. But,
you have to track all the different cartridges.
Exactly. Oh, that's just, you're just asking for it to be trouble.
Exactly.
But it's a cool little thing I thought worth mentioning.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the beginning of something bigger.
Yeah. Speaking of the beginning of something bigger.
You took it right from me.
Sorry.
Graphics are holding online shopping back.
While some companies are looking for ways to make shopping from home easier with machines that can print out prepaid vouchers for goods, for example, the big limit apparently to the online shopping revolution is the ability to show images of the goods to consumers browsing from home.
What's that like?
Well, I mean... what's it like to buy things from home? Well, let me tell you, there's this little thing called Amazon.
It'll never work.
It'll never work. Never. Yeah, but I thought this was interesting because we've talked a lot about online services in this time period on the show over the last year or two. But this New York Times article pinpointing this very specific deficiency of the current generation of computers really just hit home because, until I have a really good visual of an item, I'm probably not going to buy it online. And the core technology of, payment processing, browsing through databases of products, all of that is already possible at this point.
Right. And
but if I can't see it...
Yeah, if you can't see it, it's a tough sell.
Yeah.
But further supporting this, the internet is born.
Oh, we're going to close out on a big one today.
Yes.
On January 1st, 1983... the ARPANET shifted over to the use of TCP/IP, the protocol that would allow otherwise incompatible systems to talk to one another, literally giving birth to the Internet.
I love that line, literally giving birth to the Internet. It's such a short... That's a one-sentence line, but just the gravity of that is incredible.
Well, and the I in TCP/IP stands for Internetwork.
Yep.
And this is it. I mean, we now have, and we've talked about this a month or two ago. There was one of the universities was trying to create, a standard so that all the different computers plugged into the network on campus would be able to talk to one another. TCP/IP is the solution to that problem.
Mm-hmm.
And, the moment you do this, it doesn't matter if you're waiting forever for an Apple Lisa to update the screen, or if you're stuck on a 64K IBM PC, or if you are one of the cool kids with a Commodore 64, if you've got the TCP/IP, you will be able to transfer data back and forth. You may not be able to load it on the computer you're on, as many of my students have learned when they try to send me a Mac Word document or something, and I can't open it on a real computer. But yeah, so the internet is born here. It's going to take us another decade before it gets opened up to the public. We just talked about that on the last episode on our December 1992 jump. But yeah, this is a monumental occasion. And thanks to Dale for this one, because he's the one who reminded me of it. So, that concludes a very long jump episode, John. Well, almost. There's one more task. You, the co-host, must decide what is the word of the episode.
Interconnectivity.
Ooh, I like that one.
Right?
That is a good one. Yeah.
I'm proud of that one.
Interconnectivity. I dig it. So, that'll get you a lot of points on Scrabble. Now, John, remind everybody where they can find your amazing work.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We are at RetroGameSquad.com.
Very cool. When's the next episode due?
Ooh, that's a good question. We haven't recorded our we record quarterly, and we haven't hit our first quarter date yet. So look for that in about maybe a month and a half or so. But
Sweet.
We're coming. It'll usually be a doozy. We've been releasing multi-hour episodes, although this one's probably going to dwarf it somehow.
Oh, wow. What's the topic?
Platformers. 3D platformers.
Ooh,
So
yeah, there's a lot to... Please tell me you put Jumping Jack Flash on there.
It was on the list.
Jumping
It didn't
Jack.
make it. I think we put it on the Patreon pick. So, yeah, I know. We've got some good ones on there. We wanted to avoid some of the...
You're hurting me, man. You're hurting me.
I know. Well, when we do a platformer too, I'll make sure it's on there.
Yeah, that just because that's such a seminal work in that genre. Sorry, probably terrible to play nowadays, but it's the first time I played that, it just blew my mind. I was like, this is so cool. Oh, this all the new things you could do with this. But oh well, okay. I'll shut up now.
No, you're good. Next time, I'm looking for fodder to make Alex play too. So definitely.
Oh yeah, no, make him play that. I know he will be frustrated. His old school Mario sensibilities will be simply exploding in irritation as he has to very slowly, ploddingly jump and then look down to make sure he lands on the right platform and stuff. Yeah, that'll be so much fun. Sorry. I enjoy listening to the parts of the shows where you get to torture him with games that he doesn't like. So,
absolutely, certainly become a thing. Cliffhanger, best hanger.
Oh yeah, definitely. Cliffhangers. Yeah, the only thing that can beat Cliffhanger on the consoles is Cliffhanger on the Amiga.
Ooh.
Oh yeah. And the only thing that beats that is Last Action Hero on the Amiga.
Oh, man.
I
will throw in that argument the Sega CD Cliffhanger, though.
Yeah, okay. Sega CD Cliffhanger. I'd like to put that in the same category as Bram Stoker's Dracula on the Sega CD.
Whoa, what is this Amiga game? We need to stop doing these tangents. We'll take this offline for another night. Since it's getting late for you, but,
Wait,
man.
What did you just look up?
I just looked up Cliffhanger for the Amiga. This looks tremendous.
Oh, it is craptacular on it. But like I said, you think that's bad? Last Action Hero on the Amiga.
All right.
It is... How do I even begin to explain the sublime terribleness of Cliffhanger of Last Action Hero on the Amiga?
Well, we'll save it for our next Amiga special. We'll definitely do this because we're talking about making some moves in that. Wow. Yeah, this is happening too.
I'm glad I could be of service because this is Okay, that's a tangent. We're going to turn this off now. Everybody, if you're still listening, I'm very sorry. And remember, sign up for the Patreon to get the video version, get to watch River Raid, I almost said Pitfall, River Raid in amazing OG hardware and all that good rot. Okay, so see you next time. Bye-bye.